that it is 4:30. It is still the first day of March. Are we on? Okay, it's the first day of March, 2022. We are the Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council. We've already had a roll call. And so in condition of continuing with our traditions that we used to have when we first met here, and I'd like to welcome Karen Filito to the chambers. I believe this is your first meeting after having been on the council for over a year and a half. Yes. Welcome to City Hall, Karen. We usually start off with a Pledge of Allegiance, so I'd like to ask our only true veteran on the council, Bobby Richards, to lead us. Please, Bobby.
Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Well done.
Nice to do it.
Well, as our veteran on the council, we thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Coast Guard, very important branch of the military. Alrighty, let's move on to extraordinary business. We have a resolution proclaiming the 50th anniversary of Meals on Wheels, and I'd ask Karen Filito to read that and comment accordingly. And I think you have somebody in the audience.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be asked by Mayor Potter to read this proclamation today. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea celebrating the 50th anniversary of the National Senior Nutrition Program. Whereas since 1972, the National Senior Nutrition Program has funded local agencies and organizations to serve home-delivered and congregate meals that help to ensure older adults have opportunities to stay healthy, independent, and connected. And whereas more than 10 million older Americans face hunger each year, and whereas older Americans face malnutrition, isolation, and whereas local senior nutrition programs help older adults access healthy foods, nutrition screening, education and counseling, social opportunities, and other supports that encourage well-being. And whereas the Meals on Wheels of the Monterey Peninsula is an integral part of Carmel, providing sustenance and so much more to our older community members, especially those most vulnerable to social isolation. And whereas Meals on Wheels of the Monterey Peninsula is having a positive impact on our community and its senior members by nourishing their bodies, minds, and spirits, empowering seniors, disabled adults, veterans to remain independent, driving out hunger and isolation in our region. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Karen Filito, on behalf of Dave Potter, Mayor of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, on behalf of the entire City Council and the citizens of Carmel, hereby proclaim March 2022 to be the 50th anniversary of the National Senior Nutrition Program. We urge every resident to recognize older adults and the people who support them through nutrition services as essential contributors to the strength of our community.
Well done.
Thank you very much. And I do believe Esther Hobbs may be here and might want to say a word or two on behalf of Meals on Wheels.
Excellent.
Good afternoon. My name is Esther Hobbs, and I'm joined today by our Executive Director at Meals on Wheels of the Monterey Peninsula, Christine Wingy. We just wanted to say thank you very much to Carmel. We are so happy that we have been able to serve the citizens of Carmel for the last 50 years. And since COVID, we have had more than 92% increase in demand for services in the city of Carmel. And we look forward to meeting the demand for services for the next 50 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a privilege as a council person to be able to read this proclamation, and we have it for you, I believe,
Yes, we do.
to take with you today.
Thank you.
I'd also like to announce to my fellow council members that Esther has told me if any of you would like to deliver some Meals on Wheels, there are dates available, March 21st, 25th, and the 28th through the 31st. And I have Esther's contact information, which I'll pass on to all of you so that you could contact her if you'd like to do that.
And I'd encourage people on council to do that. I did it when I was on the Board of Supervisors. It's very eye-opening to find out how many people in this community are dependent on Meals on Wheels. It's also perhaps their only social contact. It's almost like a welfare check to make sure they're still, cognizant and they've got the services they need. It's very, very important. So it's not just delivering food, it's also making sure that these people have a quality of life that matters. But
It is.
Absolutely, and we look forward to expanding our programs into a second kitchen here soon in the next year or so.
Excellent.
Serving even more folks.
well, thank you. It's a very
Thank you
gratifying
very
thing.
much.
Well done. All right, next we have a resolution designating March as American Red Cross Month. As somebody who had a lot of interaction with the Red Cross during my tenure on the Board of Supervisors dealing with natural disasters, I can tell you they're a wonderful first responder. They were the organization we went to when we needed help, we needed things set up, especially for evacuation. So this resolution is extremely long, so I'm just going to excerpt a couple of pieces from it before I go to the representative, who I think is Michelle. Are you here, Michelle?
Yeah, Michelle's here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle Averill. All right, whereas March is American Red Cross Month, a special time to honor the kindness of our neighbors who aid families in need every day in Monterey County, across the United States and around the world. Their dedication touches millions of lives each year as they carry out the organization's 140-year mission of preventing and alleviating suffering. And whereas the Central Coast Chapter volunteers, 192 from Monterey, have supplied local families in other ways too. Last year in Monterey County, the Red Cross installed 377 smoke alarms, making 146 homes safer. Our Pillowcase Project and Prepare with Pedro initiatives reached 150 children, over 850 county residents enrolled in health and safety training classes, and over 1,300 blood donations were made. In addition, services were provided to 298 members of the armed forces. And whereas this life-saving work is vital to strengthening our community resilience, nearly 200 years since its birth of American Red Cross founder Clara Barton, we dedicate this month of March to all those who continue to advance their noble legacy, and we ask others to join in this commitment to care for people in need. Now therefore it be proclaimed that I, Dave Potter, Mayor of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, on behalf of the City Council and all the citizens of Carmel, hereby proclaim March 2022, this should be. It's a typo here. As Red Cross Month, I encourage all Americans to reach out and to support its humanitarian mission. Signed, David L. Potter, Mayor of Carmel-by-the-Sea. I really appreciate the efforts. It's an incredible organization. 140 years is a long time to do anything, but to do so successfully and so valiantly is really worthwhile. Michelle, did you want to say a couple of words?
I'd love to. Thank you, Mayor Potter, and thank you, City Council. It's my honor to be here tonight, and I'm also joined with two of our phenomenal board members, John Cromwell, who's a Carmel-by-the-Sea resident, as well as our board chair, Dane Laub. And they're just going to give you a few highlights about some of our Red Cross work and share how you can also become a Red Cross volunteer. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate all your hard work. Really typical of Carmel, best volunteers in the town. So thank you very much. All right, why don't we move on then to public appearances? This is an opportunity for anybody to speak. Oh, I'm sorry, John, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all. Just wanted to touch base quickly, and I know Dane is going to follow up with a few comments as well, because it sounds like, obviously you've had a long relationship with the Red Cross. You're familiar with our history, but others there in the council may not be aware of how long the history of the Red Cross and Carmel are linked. I don't know if you're aware, but that the Red Cross set up its operations in the city of Carmel before the city of Carmel was even incorporated. So it's been well over 100 years. It's in fact, at one point in time, the Red Cross actually provided the ambulance service on a contract basis for the city of Carmel. But at this date, you're all familiar with our building right there at the corner of 8th and Dolores. We have a large training facility, and we conduct training operations for city residents and other residents around the area at that facility on a regular basis. Even throughout the pandemic, we've been doing so. So we very much are a part of the community and very much welcome volunteer activity and look forward to continuing that activity here in the fine city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. At this point, what I want to do is hand it over to Dane. He's going to talk with you a bit more about some of the other services that we've been involved in.
Dane, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Mayor Potter. Really appreciate you and the City Council's proclamation this evening. You know, our mission wouldn't be possible without the community heroes and our Red Cross volunteers. And during our annual Red Cross Month, the celebration in March, we honor their commitment and support individuals and families in need. And this is usually on someone's darkest day, and we hope to be that beacon of hope. Right now, many of us are thinking about the citizens of Ukraine, and I want everyone here to know that we at the Red Cross are standing there and offering our services to those in need, wherever that need may be, whether it's in a war zone like the Ukraine or here in our backyard in Carmel. And really this tradition began nearly 80 years ago when Franklin Roosevelt first issued the National Red Cross Month proclamation, and each president has followed. And today we have a workforce powered by more than 90% of us are volunteers. And let me just share a few of the great things that we have done. Your local Red Cross, alongside with county partners, has provided sheltering, feeding, and recovery for those in recent wildfires. The Monterey County and those residents displaced near the Tongan tsunami in Santa Cruz. And then for the recovery effort after the CZU, Dolan, Carmel wildfires in 2020, Red Cross has provided over $2.5 million in grant support to local partner organizations who assist the residents with recovery and rebuilding. In terms of support directly to those residents affected by the 2020 fires, the Red Cross supported 17 cases for 55 people in Monterey County, 244 cases for 591 people in Santa Cruz County, and provided immediate assistance and resources for long-term recovery. After a fire, you can imagine you're not going to just walk into your house the next day. There's going to be both mental health recovery as well as financial and shelter recovery. Let me turn it back over to John to talk about our blood services.
So I'm sure you're all aware of the importance of the blood drives. Obviously, we've been experiencing a bit of a shortage nationwide, partly brought about, in fact, very much brought about because of the pandemic. Every 2 seconds, someone in the U.S. needs blood, and one donation can save up to 3 lives. The Red Cross holds blood drives across the country every day where volunteer blood donors roll up a sleeve to help patients in need. In fact, just last week, we had a drive right here in Carmel at Church of the Wayfarer. And I was there, and we have lots of other donors from throughout Carmel and the greater Monterey area. Over the past year, our blood supply has diminished to a critical level, and we ask that you please support the effort to build back supply and capacity and support a blood drive soon. It's simple to make an appointment. You can actually do it online at redcrossblood.org and find a convenient drive-by near you. Thank you. Let me touch briefly also in terms of our services to the armed forces and international services. And this is particularly important now because of Ukraine, but it's always been a core mission of the Red Cross. Red Cross volunteers provide 24/7 global support to help military families, including many who have experienced multiple deployments over the past decade. In addition, as part of the world's largest humanitarian network, Red Cross workers respond to international disasters and help communities prepare for emergencies around the globe. Locally, we assisted over 130 active service members and their families with their emergency situations, including financial assistance and emergency communication services. We were also able to provide comfort kits to veterans and National Guard members. We made masks for VA facilities. Regionally, we have assisted 17 families in reconnecting with their loved ones around the world through the Restoring Family Links program. Dane?
So what I want to piggyback on what John said, and you can get an app, there's an app for everything, and you can get an app on your phone to schedule a blood donation. It's a very simple process, and you'll find an area near you. And that leads me into our training that we offer. Many of you probably have taken either CPR training or lifeguard training or some type of training that the Red Cross offers. I know I did my CPR training right down there on 8th and Dolores so that I could be certified in the event I'm called upon to rescue someone in need. I'd also like to mention about some of the work we're doing on climate change. You know, the Red Cross is committed to doing their part on reducing the current and future humanitarian impacts that climate change is really bringing against many of those most vulnerable in our communities and around the world. And I want everyone to know that we care about what's going on with our climate, and we're doing everything we can at the Red Cross to reduce our carbon footprint. And we're helping with education within our community and advocacy where we can. Let me kick it over to Michelle to close us out.
Thank you, Dane. So just wanted to mention, we are always looking for volunteers. And if you're interested in becoming a volunteer, you can go to redcross.org/volunteer today, and you can see what our needs are, and hopefully you'll connect with one of those. But we couldn't do the work that we do without our incredible team of volunteers. As we mentioned, you know, we're run by 90% of a volunteer force. And I just feel truly honored to get to work with such an incredible group of people. So I appreciate the opportunity to present to you today. Thank you for the proclamation and for all of your support. And if you ever need anything, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Michelle, John, and Dane. Much appreciated. Well done.
Thank
Keep it
you.
up. Yes. All righty, so let's move on then to public appearances. An opportunity for any member of the public to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. There's a 3-minute limitation on the testimony. If you'd state your name for the record, I'd appreciate it. Is there anybody wishing to speak tonight? Do come forward, don't be hesitant. Come on forward.
Greetings, City Council members. My name is Eric Tarbox. I am the Deputy Scout Executive for the Silicon Valley Monterey Bay Council of the Boy Scouts. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. We are very optimistic and appreciative of the opportunity to take a look at the Carmel Scout House. Our council is strong. We have a lot of great board members and volunteers, many thousands of Scoutmasters, Cubmasters, and Scouts. And we're excited at the opportunity to work together with you to see about the possibilities of reopening the Carmel Scout House. We have a strong sense of optimism of how it can be a resource to the community, to hear about what is important to the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea so that it can be a community resource, and to work in concert with you about reopening it. So we're excited to come on March 10th and present some ideas and plans to you, and we are very excited to hear your input and guidance and to work in concert with you for the best of Carmel-by-the-Sea and its youth. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eric. Well said.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, council members. It is so wonderful to have the chambers open again and to see all of you in person. It's really terrific, and that we're all well. I'm Melanie Billig, and I would just like to ask the staff and council if they would take some real serious consideration about these partial ownerships that have now appeared in Carmel. And I would encourage you to look online and see what is going on in the rest of the state and in the rest of the world with these partial ownerships. I think that they will have could have a tremendously negative impact on Carmel, our whole environment, our residential neighborhoods, the ability of people to buy properties like all of us and be able to live in Carmel, and the big concern about turning it into just a total real estate project and a location for intense investment that is not, I don't think, applicable to the kind of community that we have always had here and that I think we want to keep. So I encourage you to talk about this, think about it, and research it online, and also look at the communities besides ourselves that are being impacted in the state of California. Look at League of California Cities. You'll be amazed at what people are trying to do and the increased cost of housing it's impacting in the state of California, and of course, you know, around the world as well. So thank you very much for your time and your careful consideration. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Melanie. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Yes, and is there anybody in the cyber world out there that wishes to speak?
Mr. Thomas, would you like to speak?
John Thompson.
Could we get him a mic? Thank you, Chief. Got that one right there.
On the bottom of it, Chief. There you go.
Can't seem to get this to work. Can you step up to the podium, Mr. Thank you. Sorry about that. Oh, I got it to work now.
Yeah, boy.
Now we know.
Thank you for this opportunity. I had a great opportunity in my life when I was born here in 1945, and my grandparents lived here. My parents had a cottage here, and two more generations of our children went to school here. So obviously I love Carmel. I was very active in environmental issues on trees, and I wrote about them in published articles. And one tree that was close to my property was getting sick, and we belong to Native American church, so we noticed when we looked out of our window in the morning, there were 1,000 crows before dawn came to that tree and sang for it. I don't know if you heard crows singing or not, but they do sing. And but the tree got worse and died. And I had a phone call from PG&E that said that the representative said, oh, we'd like to take down that tree. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we'd like to remove it. It's dead, you know. And he said, but don't worry, you won't have to pay for it. That's all I have to hear from somebody. And then the next day I got someone from Community Tree Service, and they said the same thing, and you won't have to pay for it. So in my overheated imagination, I thought they were going to cut it down and take it away. 2 days later, they didn't show up, and it's been 2 months that the tree is in my yard. And the tree in diagrams I've submitted to Jeff and some other people. And on the survey map shows that the tree was mostly on the city's property and a little bit on mine. So to get rid of it, I took out bids, and they all came up to the number $2,600, which is exactly how much money I have in my Bank of America account. We are a low-income family now. So I was hoping that someone could advise me where I could get some help with people helping pay to get some of the trees, or at least some part of it, removed. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. We'll have Chip will speak to that under his city administrator's announcements. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Seeing no one, I'll close the public appearance items, move on into announcements.
Excuse me.
Yes.
On Zoom, on the cyber world, I see 3 hands raised on the cyber world.
Okay, that'd be helpful if you let me know that. Thank you. So announce who they are.
Well, Richard Kreitman here.
Richard.
So, Mayor, Council, Community, I was dismayed the other day to learn that I had been under the misapprehension that smoking was banned in our downtown commercial district on the sidewalks, or at least within 20 or 20 feet of business entrances, but that is not so. According to Carmel City Code, smoking of tobacco products is banned on scenic, at the beach, and city parks, and most city-owned buildings, but it's permitted on all the sidewalks and in the streets. Anyone could walk down the sidewalk smoking cigarettes or vape pens or cigars and pipes, no marijuana, producing as much smoke as they like, and that smoke is defined by the state of California as a toxic pollutant, which it is. And they can linger outside of business, including restaurants where smoking is banned, and fill those businesses with foul, poisonous smoke and not violating any ordinance. Indeed, according to our code, if I, as a business owner, do not prominently place no smoking signs, anyone can come in smoking and they're not in violation. Fortunately, I can ask them to leave as a business owner. So my question is, why are we so behind the curve on this? Dozens of California cities already have some form of a ban on smoking in the public right-of-way. I believe this came up during the second Burnett administration, but it got lost in the tumult of that time. And a couple of business owner speakers opposed such a ban because they felt that it would discourage valued foreign visitors who like to smoke from coming to Carmel. I think that's hogwash. But when and if we have a ban, those concerned businessmen could promote smoking on their premises and attract those customers. So I believe we would have overwhelming approvals for such a ban from residents, our business community, and our visitors. It would probably be over 80% from each group. And though my concern is primarily with tobacco smoke, I know that many in the community, including members of the city council, are equally concerned with the quantity of cigarette butts that litter our sidewalks and streets and the environmental hazard they represent. So I ask you please to consider putting this issue on an upcoming council agenda, and I will email this with links to the appropriate areas for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Yashin, you got to let them in.
Beth Bowman with the Sunset Cultural Center. Hello, Mayor, City Council, and City staff. I'm here to thank our patrons for following the COVID safety guidelines in our theater as we continue to follow California's recommendations for mega indoor events. Here are the upcoming March events at the Sunset Center. Roseanne Cash on March 4th, Stunt Dog Experience on March 11th, Carmel Music Society's Manuel Baruco on guitar, March 13th, Monterey Symphony's Bay on March 19th and 20th, and Melissa Etheridge on March 26th and 27th. Details can be found on our website. Finally, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Carmel Cares for the beautiful new kiosk that's installed on San Carlos Street and 9th that now proudly displays our event posters. I look forward to seeing you all at the Sunset Center soon. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, you have one more hand up. Yashin may not be able to see because she has the timer up. Looks like CR also has a hand up. CR, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Shelley, and I was wanting to speak this afternoon in relation to Carmel's emergency ordinance, section 7 and 8, that were added yesterday from their meeting. The ordinance now indicates that people need proof of full COVID vaccination to enter into certain city buildings. And I wanted to bring that up tonight because I was quite surprised and disillusioned that this was being added to the emergency ordinance. I don't understand what the emergency is at this point and why that mandate is being added. And so I was wondering what the rationale was behind the timing of this. It seems like the emergency has passed now that we're 2 years into the pandemic, and the numbers of hospitalizations and cases are decreasing, and areas across the country are canceling mandates and loosening restrictions. So I just was really amazed that City of Carmel was taking that step at this time and limiting public access to city buildings and limiting the resources and services to all of its citizens. And specifically, I can speak mostly to my using of the children's library for my children, and I really don't understand, especially this proof of full COVID vaccination for the children in the children's library. Last time I looked for Monterey County, there was only about 40% of the children ages 5 to 12 that were vaccinated against COVID. And so that means those 60% of that age range children will not be able to use the library. And also children less than age 5 do not even have an option available to get the COVID vaccination. So there was no language exempting them from your mandate of every individual needing to provide proof of vaccination to enter the city buildings, including the Park Branch Library. So I am hoping for additional rationale for the timing of this and the reasoning for this and how this is really helping the community at this point in time. It really sounds like it is actually limiting community services that people pay taxes for and have become dependent on. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor, I don't see any more hands raised on the Zoom at this point.
Announcement, City Administrator.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a pile, so I'll apologize in advance. I wanted to first thank CERT. Scott Smythe is in the gallery here for checking Vax records for this meeting, for public meetings. And just a clarification, we have received a lot of calls. I wanted to apologize. The purpose of last night's urgency ordinance was to check Vax records coming into city facilities for meetings. So nothing in our protocols is changing. We're not checking vaccination records at the library, nor at the police department, nor at City Hall. So I talked to the city attorney about that. There's no clarification needed to the urgency ordinance, but I apologize for that misinterpretation, I think. We could have been clearer. So we're all good. We're not checking Vax records. Welcome back to everyone. Please be patient. This is our first meeting back in 2 years. It is a hybrid setting, so you just heard. We do have people that are remote, so please be patient while we work through this kind of a format. I am wearing what's called a suit. Rocket said to me today, what are you wearing, and does it still fit? And I'm glad to report that yes, it still fits, and yeah, I'll be wearing this, at least once a month. Remember to wear your masks in the chambers, please, and be nice to each other when you're sitting next to each other. I wanted to thank Chief Euler, Brandon Swanson, and Commander Watkins. They went rogue this morning and left the city boundaries and actually painted out some horrific racist graffiti on the old Carmel Hospital. I was proud to have helped out. That's the kind of community service that has no boundaries. We took care of that on both floors of the old Carmel Hospital, but I was really proud of, again, our chief and the commander and Brandon to have taken the initiative to remove some really hateful graffiti. We received a lot of calls on that as well, and it's now abated. I want to thank Councilmember Ferlito for suggesting that at our weekly vlogs periodically, Brandon and I invite an unsung hero, someone in the community that may not be as well known, to talk for just a couple of minutes, because we just have a couple of minutes. Cindy Lloyd was our guest last week. So if you know of someone that you think that we should have on to introduce to the greater Carmel community, the millions of people that follow us worldwide, please suggest them to either myself or Brandon. I talked about the urgency ordinance. I did want to, Mr. Muir, I don't know if you've all met. Fred Muir is our interim city public works director. Thank you, Fred, for joining us. He's already doing a great job. He's going to tag team the presentation on the PD remodel with Chief Euler, another wonderful set of fresh eyes that we have. I believe that we have solved Mr. Thompson's tree issue. We will be removing that tree on the Thompsons' behalf. Mr. Muir is taking a look at that, and that will be abated in the next round of tree removal. So that should be all squared away. And I think, Mayor, you were going to suggest that we adjourn tonight's meeting in the memory of J.D. Alvarado.
Exactly. The Salinas officer was slain over the weekend. It's most appropriate that we acknowledge that when it comes to law enforcement, we're a community united, and I want to make sure that we continue to respect the fellow officers in other jurisdictions. We have been flying the flag at half-mast out in front of our buildings, recognizing that the public sacrifice is the most significant one we can ever expect anybody to make, is to fall in the line of duty service. So I hope the council understands that this is appropriate action.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, is that it?
Yes, sir.
All right, City Attorney Brian, do you have anything to announce? I don't think you do. All right, we'll assume you don't.
No, well, it took me, I just needed to unmute myself, Mayor. I have no, I don't know why I'm getting all the echo, but I have no report.
All righty. That noted, why don't we go to council members? Looking to my right, Councilmember Barron?
Yes, thank you. My typical monthly announcement about our climate change meeting, on March 17th, we'll be looking at first final draft of both the Climate Action Plan and the Climate Adaptation Plan. So we're looking for public feedback. I know we're going to start taking them out to the community, including the commissions, before we bring those drafts to the council, I think in May,
Right.
May or June. So looking to see you on March 17th.
Great, thanks, John. Anybody to my left? Bobby?
Yeah, I'd just like to give a shout out to the Carmel High mock trial. They won this year again for the 8th year. It's unprecedented that schools won that many times all in a row. So congratulations, Carmel High.
Karen?
Yes, I would just like to thank the staff for all the work that they did to make this meeting possible. This is my first meeting in chambers as a council member, and it feels rather strange not to be in my cold extra bedroom.
Yeah.
But I would also like to just ask your patience. We're all trying to do the right thing, and day to day we don't know what that is. This is something that we may need to take baby steps forward, and at some time we may need to take baby steps backwards. So please know that we want to hear from you. We want you to participate in the meetings, and our staff has worked really, really hard in order to make that possible. So I am very thankful that we are back in chambers and hope that this is not going to be a step back. But I do ask in the name of all of us that you really just bear with us and be patient. And wearing a mask is a small thing to ask to keep other people protected and to keep yourself protected. So let's just hang in there a little longer and be healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I just note that on March 10th at 4 o'clock, the council is having a retreat with public participation. Encouraged, Eric, you were good enough to note that that would be a good time to come forward, make your case for the Scout House. I think others that have interest in the 38 priorities, we're going to be looking for public input. I know public input's been a little hard to come by these days, but this will be in person. We're going to go ahead and encourage everybody to show up. It's been a little sparse in attendance at the last few ones we've had. So that noted, why don't we then go on to the consent calendar. 6 items on the consent calendar. Anybody on council wishing to pull an item?
Yes, Item 4.
Item 4.
The grease interceptor policy.
Okay, and that's for modification? Or?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
please.
Anybody else? Carrie?
Item 6, I had asked Chip to provide some detail on that.
All righty.
Maybe we can ask Ms. Scattini. The question specifically from Councilmember Tice is the money that we're proposing to use, the Biden bucks, the ARPA funds, would be entirely used by the 2 categories that you have identified. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, that is correct. And then, as noted in the staff report, any expenditures that were budgeted to be covered with other funds, whether they be general fund, Measure C, TOT, those funds would then be available for additional expenditures, at your council's discretion. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay. So why don't we have a motion then to approve items 1 through 5 on the consent calendar, on 1, 2, 3, skip 4, 5, and 6. We've pulled 4 for suggested modifications by Councilmember Barron. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to anything on the consent calendar? All right, seeing no one, hearing no one, we'll go ahead and move those items. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second?
Motion is second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Baird.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
And Mayor Potter.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
All right, so this is item number 4, which Jeff wanted to discuss, Resolution 2022-019, approving policy 2022-01, establishing guidelines for the preview of projects involving the installation of a grease interceptor. You want to get a staff report on this, Jeff? Or?
Maybe we have a question for Mr. Barron, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
I don't need a staff report. I just
Okay.
I have a question and a suggested modification. In the policy, down near the bottom of both the staff report and the actual written policy, the policy states that grease interceptor locations that impact the following resources are discouraged by the city. And what I would ask the council is, what I would really like to see is that the grease interceptor approvals that involve these 7 items listed are actually escalated to the city council for approval. So if a grease interceptor is on an arterial street or a driveway or near a storm drain outlet, et cetera, staff would not have the authority to necessarily approve that policy without a council review. So that is my ask.
All right, before I go to council members for discussion, is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item? Anybody in the Zoom world?
Mayor, I don't see any raised hands on Zoom.
Thank you, Yashin. All right, why don't we bring it back to council for discussion and direction? Council members, your preference? Carrie?
I'm fine with that. I think, Jeff, what you're saying is you just want to be a little more conservative when it comes to that so that the council can review that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
City Administrator, do you have any comments?
No, that's fine. Again, this is not something we see extremely frequently. I think the higher threshold, this is the exception rather than the norm, to coin the phrase that we used when we approved one recently. So I think that's a fine policy modification. We're supportive, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, with that noted, then, Jeff, do you want to make a motion to approve with that
Yes, I
modification?
do have some language where it says are discouraged by the city down at the end. I would change that to say discouraged in the city, and applications for interceptors in these locations require approval of the city council.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Yashin, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
And Mayor Potter.
Aye.
The motion passes. The vote is unanimous.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to orders of business. Resolution 2022-022, accepting a status report and amending the fiscal year 2021/22 capital improvement budget plan to include the police building renovation project with a budget of $2 million. Okay, so do we want to have Chief, do you want to do this, or?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The Chief's going to present, and Fred's going to, Mr. Mayor is going to provide some color as well. And then Ms. Scattini does have some slides at the end of the presentation that I think Mr. Barron had asked for some additional information at mid-year review. So we've added some columns to some of the slides at the end.
I will note that I thought that this had been through an incredibly extensive amount of review as I read the staff report. Then I realized that they've been reproduced twice in the staff report, so.
Yeah, I apologize for that as well, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, our agenda management system in April of 2018, yes. So there's some, we got the packet out a little bit later than we like to, but again, that's part of the bearing with us that Councilmember Ferlito has begged. I do want to preface this project by saying this is just incredibly important. I certainly heard the passion in all of your voices, and I agree with it. You know, from last month when we talked about this, this was a really unfortunate. This was unfortunately impacted by the pandemic, We were pretty close, pretty poised to go 2 years ago when the pandemic hit. So it's unfortunate that we've had to mothball it until now. The real beauty of where we are, again, is we do have 2 fresh sets of eyes with Chief Euler and Mr. Muir to look at this. And that's why you see a couple of modifications to the original plan. This isn't Project Creep because you haven't approved anything yet. But this is, again, to make a facility that is Carmel-worthy and also to really honor our police officers in a facility that's open 24/7, 365. And then you'll also see a bullet by Chief Euler that talks about another phase that we're thinking about. And you can ignore it tonight. And if you do, I'll bring it up next Thursday on the 10th when we talk about priorities. If, however, you want to give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, there's not an appropriation built into today, but you can give us your feeling about creating a community room, a safe location for CERT to meet, as well as a location for our EOC. So anyway, I've talked longer than I expected. Please, Chief Euler, take it away.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and citizens of Carmel. I'm Brian Euler, your proudly serving interim police chief. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you today. So today we're going to be talking about the police building. Historically, when you look at some of the records that went before council, there was many uses of the word renovation. And I'd like to point out that when you start looking critically at the project as it was ultimately approved in 2019, it was more of an ADA project. It was a maintenance project, some of the old systems in the building, and it was modifying the areas that were affected by the ADA project. So from that perspective, it's just to form a view. We didn't want you to be thinking of this as a full renovation because you renovate and you're done for a long time, right? So in this case, we're wanting to make sure the focus is clear. So as you look at the project, the original objectives were to, as we described, maintenance and modifications of a 54-year-old building that includes the mechanical systems, electrical, building code updates, removal and encapsulation of asbestos, reallocation of the existing spaces to include evidence processing, a visitor-focused front counter area, and modifications for creating the restroom, and then update some of the finishes and so forth in the EOC. With regard to the key project events, I'm going to breeze through the first 5 years or so and focus on 2019, which is when the revised project and design was approved by City Council with the cost estimate at 1.14, and then fast forward from 2019 to the beginning of the pandemic in June of 2020, when this council was struggling with a lot of unknowns as it relates to COVID, and the bids coming in over the projected cost amounts at 1.31. So the project was parked at that point in time for obviously good reasons. In 2021, $50,000 was appropriated for rewiring and updating the dispatch room. There's wiring in the building as it relates to dispatch. This project needed to be completed before a renovation could be done. I'm proud to say that project is near completion. Literally that room is completely cleared out. For those of you that remember touring that building with me, it was filled up with spaghetti-like wires, and that is cleared out now. Much of that equipment has been either taken completely out because it wasn't even used or relocated in the building. So moving forward to just an overview of the location, the police department is here where my fancy laser pointer via Zoom is located. Right behind us is the youth center, Junipero Street, and then 4th Avenue over here. Later on in the presentation, you'll notice that there's an area right here where this pointer is located. That's going to be a future ADA compliant parking site for visitors in the police department that need ADA access. So again, the exterior renovations are not breathtaking by any means. This isn't going to change the look of the building drastically. It is going to be a fresh coat of paint. The mansard style roofing is going to be updated and changed. So the visual appearance should be improved by what was presented previously. It's upgrading the railings to code, and then exterior painting is really, and then the establishment of all the ADA functions of the building. So again, this is a floor plan. This is where the additional ADA parking is. And then here is the ramp area where a person needing the access there would be able to access the building through there. Landing doors here, and in the next slide you'll see some interior spaces and new railings to code here. So those are exterior modifications. And I'd like to point out that my recollection in talking with Bob about this project, Mr. Harari, many of the expenses associated with what was presented before were really focused on ADA compliance. So you're talking about a lot of concrete, a lot of structural stuff happening relative to ADA. On the interior renovations, again, asbestos abatement, establishing the lobby restroom. I'm not going to bore you with reading this entire slide over, but focusing on a front counter area to include, and then refinishing the EOC in the lower level was the original design. Having taken a fresh perspective on that, we'd like to present you with an alternative a little later in the presentation. New evidence handling areas and some safety and mostly with regard to interior, it's revamping and rehabbing the major systems within the building, electrical, HVAC, all of that. So on the interior space, again, this new ADA compliant restroom. Anytime you do a public building, I see Fred is moving, so I'm gonna turn it over to Fred. He's got something to say. So,
Mr. Harari told me that this was really an important project as we had our 1 day of overlap. And so my second day, I asked for a tour, and the chief and I went through it. And I've got to tell you, I was aghast. The reporter that described it in that article, I thought actually was really kind. So I was really happy to see that there was this, quote, PD renovation project. And then the next day we sat down with the drawings, and I realized that it wasn't a PD renovation project. It really was a maintenance, unfinanced maintenance and code upgrade to meet current ADA standards and so on. And what flashed through my mind is, this is not what we want, is to spend this money and then have the report say, well, we spent this money, but what if functionality was improved? And that was where my concern was with regard to the police officers, where they actually do their work. I mean, I was kind of intrigued when I was actually waiting for the chief to pick me up for my first tour, because there was an officer in the lobby interviewing a crime victim about a bicycle. I thought, well, that's strange. Maybe something's wrong. I didn't realize, well, you don't have an interview room. And you can imagine the sensitivity of some of these interactions. And it's just uncomfortable. And it certainly doesn't represent Carmel-by-the-Sea the way I think you want it to be represented. And that's kind of an observation in a number of places in terms of the investment in public facilities. But that was when the chief and I started talking about, okay, if I look at what is going on today in terms of our workforce, what are we doing for the police officers that are going out there and putting it on the line every day? Because we see that sometimes even a traffic stop doesn't always turn out well. And that was when we started looking, okay, we really need to relook the flow, how the officers are able to address their equipment, how their equipment is taken care of. We need to be ready for a very changing workforce. I mean, nobody 54 years ago thought that the law, the requirements would be we need a lactation space for our female officers if that's needed. We need to do that. It's just the right thing to do. So I'll let the chief get into the details, but that was sort of the stimulus. Let's make sure we're really meeting the operational needs, and it would not make sense to do all this maintenance stuff and then come back and charge the building up again to redo the plumbing, to do the bathrooms and so on. It really ought to be one project for this first, I'll call it phase, and then we can talk about some of the other things. I'll mention some of the other things when we get there.
Thanks. Thank you. So as I was describing, there was the addition of the ADA bathroom here that was impacted. And as I was saying, anytime you touch a public building, you have to do ADA improvements when you do that. And as a result of the modification adding the bathroom, there was a need to create, we have 4 offices in this space, but pushing into one of those offices created 3 offices here. So all of those were reconfigured with new walls. And there was some other slight modifications. In the center area of the building, it was defined in the original plans as approved in 2019 for this to be a property room or property area. You might remember a time in this building where this was a community service room. I've been told by officers who have been here a long time and some of you who visited me that this room was used a lot by the public, and it was a highly valuable resource. Along the way, some other priorities and the need to have properly handled evidence ended up taking a priority. So moving on to what is the current project status. These are a listing of the things that have already occurred. Drawings have been completed, specs and special provisions have been completed. Hazardous materials, you've seen a reference to asbestos, that's already been done. Building permit was issued, but it requires an update. The bids opened in 2020, and as you know, in June of 2020, that ultimately was rejected, and then the $50,000 that is nearing completion. To resume the main project, today we're asking for the $2 million to be allocated for the project. Initially, most of those funds would be used to revise the project, as might be the case if you define today or in a future council meeting. Re-engaging the architect and then starting with planning for the temporary quarters that'll be necessary. A project manager will be necessary for this project. That's going to be a big part of the project. Updating the contract and design documents, which you'll see a little bit more in terms of our ideas moving forward, and then re-advertising, and then opening the bids and then awarding the contract. That's what nothing that you spend today is actually going to hit the road. The rubber isn't hitting the road until you see something in the way of an award. So
what I don't want the council or the public to think is that...
Fred, could you stand a little closer to the mic? Yeah.
I don't want you or the public to think that a $2 million investment is going to make you a new facility. Basically, at this point in time, the $2 million investment is about what you're going to need to pay for the required upgrade of critical infrastructure in the building and the handicap and so on. As we talk about the redoing of the locker space, that means gutting the plumbing and all of that in that end of the building. I have the architect looking at it right now to say, okay, I need an order of magnitude. It's about 1,100 square feet. What is it going to take us, how many dollars per square foot? Because we want to come back to you on the 10th to say, okay, here's what we are looking at least for that phase, and here's what it would be looking at if we went into the extra space. So right now, the $2 million, make sure that if push comes to shove, you can bring it up to code, you can meet handicap accessibility requirements, and you have to bring it up to code because we do have a totally new code since this thing was advertised the first time. So that's what this money is. To give you an example of the environment we're working in, and Mayor Potter can probably describe it much more personally than I can, when I was talking to the architect, he was working on a project that was using metal studs rather than 2x4 wood studs. And he said he was given a price by the supplier for a purchase on 1 March and was told that if you wait till 1 April, it goes up 10%. 1 May, 10%. I mean, those are just cost escalations that are just unfathomable. Some of you are dealing with it in your own businesses. The other piece is getting the workers to do the work. The skilled workforce that we need to do this kind of work is few and far between. He was saying that many of these private projects, the contractors won't even give you a bid. They will say, yes, I can work it in, and we'll do it time and material, as opposed to the normal traditional public works, we got to have 3 bids and so on. So that's the environment we're working in, and that's why we're saying about $2 million to do what bid, I guess, at 1.4. But we'll be back with the scoping. So you'll get the minimum done, but we'll have to come back with the scoping for the next 2 pieces to see, okay, how do we pay for this?
Thank you, Mr. Murray. So the essential additional elements we'd like for the council to consider is updating the line staff area to improve or modernize the locker area, create a private interview room, as Mr. Muir described. We have officers actually interviewing victims of crime. If someone wants to report a sensitive case, if, say, for example, they're reporting a domestic violence and they're talking to our officer in the lobby, someone else is coming in to talk to them about a parking permit. And, you know, it's all happening right there. So that's a thing that we need to solve. I'd like to suggest that we add infrastructure for EV charging. Long range, this council has expressed interest in moving forward with environmentally forward-thinking ways of doing business. So if we're going to be working on that building, let's run some heavy-duty wire for future EV charging stations. I'm not suggesting that we actually put the charging apparatus in, but at least run the wire. Other safety issues or scaling opportunities as identified by Mr. Muir and myself as we're engaging with these architects.
Councilmember Barron and Tice recently sort of led the discussion on your emerging climate change plan. Climate change, a lot of people think is just about the weather and sea level rise and so on. There are so many others issues associated with the resilience of your city facilities and the ability for your city facilities to perform under the most probable, I'll call it attacks. The attack may be a canopy fire that is taking out your electricity momentarily. It could be a PG&E rolling outage, or it could be a cyber attack, like many cities have been attacked, that shuts down your systems. So as we're looking at climate change and looking at resilience, you need to start thinking about critical infrastructure resilience so that the core facilities within your city can withstand any type of attack, whether it be man-made or Mother Nature. The city of Gonzales, just down the road, is doing exactly that. They are putting in, I'm not suggesting this for you, but they're actually putting in a municipal grid, microgrid, that will allow them, the whole city, to operate off the grid if the grid goes down. That's happening across the country right now because we're seeing the Colonial Pipeline threats, we're seeing solar winds, and all of the other things that tell us that there are folks that can get into the industrial controls of our critical infrastructure and do us harm. So as we're looking at this complex, what public spaces in the city will you need in that worst case scenario? And your climate action plan is going to be addressing some of that, and this is a small piece of it, is starting to look at the electrification and how you put in the microgrids and the distributed generation. So that's for a later discussion when you actually take that forward, but just so you think of these critical facilities of your public works and your public safety, because public works very often is involved in public safety, and how you make sure that those facilities and capabilities are always available to the citizens of Carmel, regardless of the threat or the attack.
Thank you. Next up is, this was the operational area of the building as it was approved in 2019. And I'd like to draw your attention, no changes to the existing design. So in terms of our officers and our staff, our frontline people, they would have moved to Vista Lobos, endured a 6-month to a year-long project, and moved back in, and their lockers would look the same, and everything would look the same except for a fresh coat of paint, and the walls essentially are unchanged. So everything here in this entire area is essentially unchanged. And after taking a good look at the plans with Mr. Muir and myself and talking to our officers and looking at what would be longer term needs, we have a suggestion that might pass with your, we hope that you approve of this idea. And that is to take, this is that same exact footprint that was outlined in pink. And rather than having a bunch of walls and closed in little spaces, we're suggesting we open this entire area up and eliminate this hallway that would have run back to this stairwell. Encroach a little bit on what is this motorcycle area, and create a gender-neutral locker area, which is commonplace in law enforcement now. Salinas just did it. I know of El Dorado County that has done this. And there are private shower and toilet facilities, which would be represented here. And in this corner would be an ADA-compliant shower, toilet, and lactation room. So this would be a little bit larger to help accommodate those other features. So, and then this footprint is a little bit, it encroaches a little bit on what is the current break area, but it's still big enough to meet our needs. So this is the current locker rooms. Many of you might remember walking this with me, and you remember how tightly cramped in those spaces are. This next slide shows you what the locker room might look like. So this is, these lockers are 24 inches across. They have storage area underneath the locker, as you can see here. There's a tray actually inside these drawers for the body armor to go. So after wearing body armor for 12 hours plus, it needs to air out. These facilities are also tied into HVAC, so it pulls the air through. So the locker room doesn't smell like a locker room. That's what we're going for. And I'm going to rewind the slides a little bit and just so keep in mind these two little rows of lockers, and going back here, you can see how that would fit in like this in these areas here. So that's sort of what that would look like. So rewinding back to 2017, which was a plan that was given a lot of consideration. This was a two-wing expansion, and it had some additional meeting spaces over here. It had the property room in this wing, and then it also had this area in the center was reopened as a community room. So that was rewinding to the community room in the center of the building. And after looking at this with Mr. Muir, myself, we recognize that this area here, number one, it has beautiful views. It could easily be a very nice multi-purpose room instead. So moving forward to what would be a vision for the future. Now remember this area here, as it was suggested in a couple of slides ago, lockers here. Sorry about that. Lockers all here, and what was a break room here. If this were to become a community training room, CERT room, emergency operations center, I'm talking about a highly technical room that has lots of AV connections, IT components built into it. So, big screens for planning purposes. This multifunction room could be used for many, many different purposes for the community. It could be used for the officers in the future for training purposes. And it could double up as a break room when it's not in use. I'm suggesting that we could put a little kitchen area in the back and maybe some storage. So this area would be like, if you can envision this, some of you remember being up there, it has some beautiful views. So you could put a lot of glass along here and make it a really nice multi-purpose room to serve the community in a lot of ways. So if the base plan and the footprint remained the same, but with this upgrade of the centralized locker area, if this were a phase 2, it would be complementary in nature. So with this, Robin is here to talk about our favorite topic, the budget.
Looks like probably the more boring part of this project, but important just the same. So I just have 3 slides to address 3 of the charts from the budget book that Councilmember Barron had asked to be updated when we were discussing the mid-year budget review. And we felt this was a very fitting place to update these charts and present them. As noted, these are just for the budgeted values. The estimated actuals will be brought to you in the next couple of months as we start discussing the fiscal year 22-23 budget. So, like I said, this is really just budgeted and how it's changed, the overall budget from when it was originally adopted. So, right now with the budget, this takes into consideration, of course, today's considerations of a budget amendments, the budget amendments that were adopted at mid-year, and then there have been some sprinkled throughout various meetings this fiscal year. So the updated budgeted revenue, if today's values were adopted, would be $28.4 million in revenue. The adopted book was 25.3, so that's an overall increase of about 3.1 million throughout the fiscal year. We feel this is a very reasonable. Today's proposal is to increase TOT by $1 million. The statistics came out last week of the November-December reporting, and I think as we all saw from that, it's we were up, even at mid-year, only about $1 million away from the whole year budget. So it's very reasonable to expect even an additional $1 million, if not more. The Measure C and state sales tax are also proposed to date budgeted values to be increased by $500,000 apiece. Of course, sales tax tends to fall in line with as our TOT increases. Our visitors are here, they're purchasing, they're dining. So again, it's very reasonable to expect that those values would come to fruition. And of course, as the chart, the pie shows, our three main sources remain TOT, property taxes, sales, and Measure C tax. So no change there. On the expenditure side, overall, then budgeted expenditures, including today's considerations, would be at 28.4 in budgeted expenditures. The originally adopted budget was 25.4, so basically about a $3 million increase on the expenditure side. The notable change on the table here is in the capital, which is being discussed today, at 16% today of the budget. And when it was adopted last June, it was at 9%. So of course, today's consideration is what's bumping it up so much. And then the final slide is the just looking again real high level at how all of these changes through the fiscal year and considerations of today is changing the budgeted fund balance. Again, still moving in a very positive direction for the city's finances, basically budgeted to increase the fund balance by about $100,000. And that goes in line with the report we had last meeting for the mid-year, that the city's finances are positive, moving in a positive direction. The city's in good financial standing, and even today's considerations will still keep the city operating in, like I said, good financial status.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Mayor, just to reinforce what Robin has said here, based on our revenue, our revised revenue estimates, we would be able to pay for the police department remodel without having to tap into fund balance at all. So again, we're asking for a $2 million appropriation. We're estimating through the rest of the fiscal year that we will close the fiscal year positively to the tune of over $3 million, and we want to use $2 million of that to pay for the police department remodel. Again, we don't have a figure for you. If you are inclined to eventually do the, and I can speak quite eloquently about the benefits of the community room now, or we can wait, and then I can pontificate next Thursday about it. About economies of scale and staging and a variety of other construction practices. Nevertheless, we remain in a very, very strong financial position, and we'll be talking about obviously next fiscal year and whether we'll maintain this momentum. in the next couple of months, but I'm really pleased at where we are, obviously. Thank you, Robin.
Yes,
And
thank
I
you.
hope-
And
I hope
and as
that-
we realize, that obviously, $2 million wouldn't be expended by June 30th, as there's a lot of groundwork that needs to occur to get this project up and going and completed. But there's also then a commitment with city administration and the finance department that anything unexpended would be prioritized and rolled into the fiscal year 22-23 capital improvement plan.
Thanks, Robin.
And I'll let Chief address the final slide.
Thank you, Robin. Your recommendations today are to accept the report, approve the concept of adding the following to the existing plan, and that is the locker room area that we discussed, the public report taking area. I realized while I was going through that, I failed to show you that, but there is a space designated off of the lobby, encroaching on what is now the property evidence room, for a small private office area for officers to escort visitors into as a result of that. And then expanding the EV charging infrastructure. So that's what we're asking for, is for you to approve the funding for the police building, ADA maintenance and modification project in the amount of $2 million. And next steps, if approved, would be the continuing work by Mr. Muir, myself, and working with the architects to solidify what would be released for the construction bid package. And then ultimately, that would come back to the council for a presentation and for approval. So if there's any questions, myself, Mr. Muir, and Robin, I'll stand ready to help you with any questions you might have.
Are there any questions of council members at this time? Jeff?
Yeah, one quick question. When you were on slide 6, you were talking about the ADA parking.
Yes.
And it's this map. So the ADA parking, and then earlier, you had made a comment about the ADA parking when you were 2 more slides previous, so when you were on slide 4. So the ADA parking that you're proposing to do as part of this project is what's on slide 6.
Yes, and what was on slide 4 was the overhead, so it's basically just represented approaching from this side.
Where that car is. Right,
It
that little
is,
car
yeah,
thing.
essentially right here where that mark is on your slide. And that would be the ADA area, and then there would be ramps to get into the police building.
And that's part of this $2 million project?
That was part of what was originally developed and approved for 2019, so no changes to that.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Carrie?
Thank you for the update. I very much appreciate that. One of my concerns is the managing of the project. So I'm asking Chip.
That's you, Fred.
Oh, Fred or Chip?
Let me start. Let me start.
That was why I was moving up.
I'm asking about how the management of the project, what the recommendations are in terms of a new staff person or hiring somebody to do this. So help me out with that one.
Let me start, sir, and then a project of this scale is really almost a full-time equivalent for the duration of the project. What Mr. Muir is looking at is asking our architects, Casavan architects, whether they have the capacity and the willingness to manage a project like this. I did not give you, under my comments, a recruitment update, but we do have good news. Brandon and I will do it on Friday, but Mr. Muir and some others have two strong candidates for project manager, but of course we have a backlog of capital projects that aren't getting done. The third leg of the stool, Councilmember, to answer your question, would be that we would potentially hire an outside firm, and Mr. Muir is in the process of getting bids from Four Leaf, Harrison Associates, another firm that does work in our area. So contracting project management. So we've got a kind of a quiver of options, both to deal with a project of this scale as well as our backlog of capital projects that we haven't gotten to, including in-house staff as well as potentially contract staff.
So in terms of another position, once the project's done, then do we have projects that that person could then continue to work on, or is this like
That's a great question. You know, I think that a lot of, well, we have a CIP capital project budget meeting, I think this month. Robin, is that correct? It's not. So we'll be talking about that. I think a lot of future capital projects will be delivered, will be identified through the work that you and Mr. Barron and the committee are doing on climate adaptation, climate action. You know, the punchline is we still have quite a lot of deferred maintenance. We have, to kind of further answer your question, in the past we have hired employees for a short term, a 2-year term, which is something that we could look at as well. So again, as Mr. Harari continues to heal, Mr. Muir and I will be talking to him about what that capacity looks like.
It's really an all of the above, and it really is going to be driven by the resources you have available and the energy you want to put in it. Because a lot of folks think of project management as just managing construction projects. It really starts a lot earlier. That's a construction manager. We really need to take many of these things from, we have a definition of an idea, but you've got to move that idea forward enough and do that management of the development of the project definition that includes working with the community, you know, participants, our proponents, the council proponents. So as I sort of walked into this, it reminded me of about 1986 when I walked into Monterey and they had lots of money put on Window on the Bay and NIP and Cannery Row Garage. They weren't getting built, Sports Center. So we did exactly what Chip said. I hired one person to be the full-time project manager, and I hired 4 on 3-year contracts, one of whom ultimately became your Public Works Director, Jim Cullum. But that's where he got started, was getting our projects launched. So you have this backlog due to COVID and backlog due to the loss of Mr. Estrella. And you also have a backlog of expectations, I think, of your community in terms of how you're going to manage the interaction of all of the community involvement with the city. Because right now it different ways. Each organization has its own, but getting a little ahead of myself there. But it really is, to answer your question, Council Member, is it's really going to be all of the above. We have, as Mr. Eric said, we have one person absolutely for sure. We have a second person that looks really good. I have preliminary proposals from Four Leaf, and I'll get one from Harris, so we can, you know, spot them in. And then there's always the potential, as in the private sector, very often the architect also does the project management. There's good and bad things about that, but I've asked for a proposal on that so we can see where we are, because the last thing I want to do is to see this police department delayed in any way because of a lack of a project manager. We're going to get it managed as soon as we get it designed and so on. So that would be my thought.
So we don't have to make that decision today?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, so Fred, before you escape, I have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Carrie, were you done? I'm sorry, I was just saying. I didn't want Fred to leave the microphone. I had a question or two for him, too. Okay. So, Fred, I'm looking at the costs to date spent on this thing for architectural, $197,349. And then you want to spend another $150 to rehire the architect? How much of the original work is actually not necessary to re-go over?
I don't have the actual proposal from him to say, okay, what is it going to cost for project management? What would that piece of the proposal be? What is it going to cost for updating current codes and specs?
Okay, so I'm just giving this to you as a heads up. I'm concerned about an architect going in and charging another $150,000 to update some plans. And I know the scopes change, but I'd be concerned about that number. You're also asking for $50,000 to go ahead and get some miscellaneous work done, you know, relocating police personnel, advertising, that kind of stuff. And then if you throw another $150,000 in here to hire the project management, we're over budget. So I'm concerned about the fact that, you know, we're kind of getting a little loose with the soft costs here, which I guess is what I'd call architectural. Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
And I know you don't have a number yet. It's just a heads up.
I don't have the proposals.
That's right. I'm just saying I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Eventually, Council, you'll be, you know, you'll be awarding the contract or contracts.
Right.
on all of this, sir.
Okay, yeah, okay. All right, if there are no other questions from the board, the council, is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item?
I just wanted to point out that I did rewind to that sign, that one slide where it shows where that private report taking area would be. This is the police lobby in that same area, so.
Chief, I had one other question. The proposed additional work, the phase 2, is
Yes.
that included in the architectural costs or not? That's just very conceptual.
It's conceptual at this point. I think the plan is to revisit with the council on the 10th and, or today and just understand exactly how the council feels about moving downfield with the architect, with the interior only, maybe the exterior. It's council's will as to, how we move forward with that in terms of engaging with the architect.
Great,
Is that your understanding, Fred?
Great. All right, Bobby?
Concerning that auxiliary building, which I think would be a fabulous asset, doesn't the architect drawings that we already have from 2017 have that?
Actually, what was there from 2017, if I can bring that PowerPoint back up, I can show you. That was this, if our production engineer, Sebastian, could bring the PowerPoint back online. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna buzz it straight through here all the way to the right slide. So this slide here shows you one of the, there were 5 different variations that were presented, none of which had this space as defined as a public meeting room. That was revising this existing space into what would be a public meeting room. And I would propose that, if you're gonna build out that building, and that has, basically that's front row, great opportunity to do something really nice there.
It does. So to answer your question, Mr. Richards, so that would be half of that component of that project. It is up on the same level of the floor level of the existing police department. So it's not down on the lower level. So it wouldn't impact that as we've had a community garden out there in the past and other things. So that doesn't, or gathering space. It wouldn't.
I just didn't want to duplicate the drawings. I was just
Yes, sir. I see.
Save some money there.
All righty, we'll open up the public now. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item? Yes.
Yeah, Mayor Potter and Chip Burke, City Manager, and members of the council and fellow community members. I'm Scott Smythe. I'm co-captain of the Carmel CERT team, along with my colleague Wanda Vollmer. I'm here just to support this initiative. We report up through Chief Euler and Corporal Michelle Lightfoot in support of emergency services for the city of Carmel, and also provide mutual aid for surrounding communities. We are in desperate need for emergency command post area, conference room space, training. We do extensive training monthly, quarterly. So the space provided in this proposal would go a long way. I will say also as a footnote through this mutual aid that we provide to adjacent communities, we have a little bit of conference room envy that we see over in Pacific Grove and Seaside and Monterey. We just had a call out last week in Pacific Grove for search of a missing person at risk. And as a former Carmel Padre, I don't like to see Pacific Grove have anything better than we have here in Carmel. So I strongly encourage the support of this initiative, and thank you for that, and we look forward to completion of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for your hard work with CERT. Much appreciated.
Mayor, City Council, members of the public, Stephen Moore, Pacific Repertory Theater, but really just somebody who grew up in Carmel, interacting with the police department a few times along the way. I support this proposal wholeheartedly. I encourage you to encumber as much money as possible that you can right now. When Fred was giving his reasoning behind the price increases, I turned to Carol Hall and said, this is the speech I just gave to my board of directors last Tuesday. The price increases of materials, the availability of contractors are very real. We had one electrical contractor bid on our project within a 4-hour drive. It's that bad trying to get labor. The electrical linemen that were paid 20 bucks an hour are now paid 40 bucks an hour if they can be found. So it's real, it's awful, it's the worst time possible to be doing a project, but we've got to keep these projects going. So I just really encourage you to do that. I saw something in the report about maybe at the end you'd come back and maybe deal with the leaks down in the basement. Please deal with the leaks down in the basement now. If you need to allocate a little bit more to deal with those leaks. Anybody who's down there, it's wet and rusty and moldy and awful, and it can't be healthy. So I just support this.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Anybody in the Zoom world? Yashin?
I don't see any raised hands right now, Mayor.
All righty. All right, that noted, then I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council for direction. I'm just going to say I remain concerned about, I'm very supportive of this project. I don't want to appear at all like I'm not supportive at all. It just seems to me, though, that when we've already spent $197,349 on drawings, there's got to be some duplication there that would reduce the request for 150 additional thousand to go ahead and update the drawings. So just a caveat as somebody who's in the industry. So the action before us tonight is to go ahead and allocate $2 million for the budget for this project, and basically adopt Resolution 2022-022, accepting a status report and amending the fiscal year 2022 budget capital improvement plan to include the police building renovation project with a budget of $2 million.
I'll make the motion that we approve the staff recommendation. Adopt Resolution 2022-022, accepting the status report and amending the FY 2021-22 capital improvement plan to include the police building renovation project with the budget of $2 million.
I'll second it. Any other discussion? Carrie?
Yes, definitely some more discussion. I think, I really appreciate a fresh look at this. Thank you, Fred and Chief. Obviously, this police station is not representative of the standard of Carmel-by-the-Sea. We need to do something, which I think we're all in agreement with, but I think we need to go beyond and take a look at what they're suggesting to really make this police station something to be proud of. Not put a Band-Aid on it, not to put a new coat of paint. I mean, obviously, ADA issues are extremely important, long overdue, but we need to make this something to be proud of. If I was a female police officer in that locker room, nobody in this room would go to that locker room. It's ridiculous. So the other concern I have is the EOC. It's still in the basement, isn't it? Yes, ma'am. It should not be in the basement, okay? So that's part of the resilience issue that Fred's bringing up. So I understand the concern with the new drawings, but this is an opportunity to really make this something to be proud of. And it's not a time to say, let's hold back. So I definitely support the motion, but I want the council to also support the suggestions that these two men, who have a lot more experience than we do in police stations, also agree with looking into what it's going to cost to do that. That's what I'm asking as part of an amendment to this motion.
I'd like to say that I support that completely. I have toured the police station, and I was frankly shocked a little bit of appalled at the conditions, and I'm concerned with retention of our very good police force. And retention, I think, can be enhanced if we improve this facility and make this a facility that is a good one to show up to work in. And I think that, as we have seen over the last couple of years, people changing jobs and going other places. We want to do everything we can to build loyalty in our police department, because it matters in a town like Carmel that doesn't have street addresses, that these people stay and become part of the community and know this community. And the condition of the EOC, to me, was absolutely shocking. That is something that was designed, what, 40 years ago? And when you think about down in that basement and those partitions that are supposed to make it so that you can talk on the phones, we don't even know whether the cell phones and everything would work down in that basement. So I think Carrie is on the right track, that we need to take this opportunity to do the job right, because if we just do the Band-Aid stuff, then we will say, oh, well, we did the police station, and it'll be another 20 years before we come back. This is the time. We have the money. I think we go for it.
Jeff.
Yes, thank you. So to address a couple of how I feel about those two issues, I agree with both Karen and Carrie that retention is an issue. But my feelings are that when I walk through the Public Works facility and where Agnes and Sarah and Bob and Yvette work, there's a pretty serious office issue down there too. And so my concern is that we pay attention to sort of the retention benefits of all the employees, not just the police officers. The Public Works facility seems to me, when I walk in there, to be on the same level as the police station is now. And I'm worried about sort of overdoing the police station and underdoing the Public Works facility and then losing Agnes or losing Sarah, because those offices are really substandard. So I don't understand the interplay between how we're prioritizing one set of offices versus another set of offices. So I'm not completely comfortable moving forward with that extra project tonight. The other thing, let's see, I've lost my train of thought. So,
Jeff, if I just might, under clarification of motion, my intent was that what we're doing is augmenting the budget and saying we want to do a renovation project. I don't think we're blessing the project as it's designed at 100% tonight. Am I correct on that? Fred, your head is going north and south. So I think that's what we're all concerned about, the quality of the project. I've got some concerns about cost creep prematurely here, but I think we all want the project to come forward. I think you guys did a good job of articulating the concerns of council, but I think what the motion does is it allocates $2 million to the capital improvement program for the project itself. Maybe it's going to get more, but if it does, we'll deal with that at that time. Chip?
Yeah, exactly, Mayor. We'll get going on this. I really appreciate the response that Councilmembers Tyson and Ferlito, and I think the rest of you agree as well, Mr. Richards, about exploring the 20 by, I call it 20 by 40 area, which again is that community room to the right of the doors when you go up the second set of stairs into the PD. But again, we don't have our homework done on that. So we'll continue to work on that, and we'll continue to work with our architect and wire brush the numbers, both the numbers for the architect as well as for the project itself, and we'll keep you apprised. And we'll come back, and my boss wants to say something, the colonel wants to say something. We'll come back when we get a firmer price for the 20 by 40 area as well.
Yeah, and I remember what my other comment was, if you give me one more minute. Back 4 years ago when we were having a conversation about the EOC and the fact that the EOC in the basement, Fred talked a few minutes ago about sort of resiliency, and my question, about having the EOC in the basement was, does the EOC even belong in the police station? So is that the right place for that facility? So if we have an issue with that block of downtown, whether it's a power issue or a fire issue or whatever it is, are we going to lose the EOC and the police station at the same time? I don't know what the answer is, but it's always been assumed that that was the right plan. And I would ask staff, if we are going to move forward with, at some point in the future, if we are going to move forward with a discussion about what to do specifically about the EOC, whether we look into whether that is in fact the way we should move forward with that.
Yeah, we can do that, Mr. Barron, certainly. The chief and Fred and I spoke today. You know, the facility is powered by a diesel generator. What happens if the diesel generator doesn't kick on? And so we definitely want to look at wiring the facility for the potential for a microgrid or solar panels. But there has to be, you know, Brandon Swanson's guardrails. There has to be guardrails. We have to say that, you know, this is the scope of the project, or we'll never get any further. I absolutely agree with all of you regarding the Public Works facility. It's a horrible facility as well, and we need it's on our capital plan. I mean, again, eventually we're going to get to it. We put a lot of Band-Aids on it. One of the scenarios that we had several years ago was, again, a much more robust expansion of the PD Public Works facility, where again we were moving offices out of the basement of Public Works. That's not what we're asking for tonight, but again, we'll continue to work on the direction that you have provided. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what everyone's saying, and I appreciate it. I'm sorry, Mr. Murai.
My first in-brief with Mr. Rewiring was he asked that I look at things as an outsider, so to speak. Look at the working conditions, look at the facilities, and so on. And your comment about the Public Works Department, engineers, particularly combat engineers, get used to making do with whatever you have, and that isn't an appropriate standard in Carmel-by-the-Sea. If you sat in some of those offices, you would marvel that they get anything done. As the traffic back and forth to the bathroom literally goes right past their desks, the backup bells for the truck. So I think what you've done is you've really provided us a head start. You focused in on the project on the agenda, but you've also given us some coaching on what you would like to see when we come back with the priorities, whether it's the 10th, I can't remember which date it is, but we're coming back with some priorities. And that was the guidance that Chip had given me in the beginning to look at that.
And just one more, I'm sorry, Mr. Richards, real quickly. Again, we did not expect you to approve the 20 by 40 area tonight, but again, I think we've gotten a good indication, the feeling that we should continue to research it, and we'll do that. And again, eventually we'll be back with some numbers for you and tell you where we are.
Bobby, were you going to say something then, Kerry?
Yeah, I was just going to say, of course, I'm interested in the 20 by 40. My motion wasn't involved with that. My motion was to approve this. But yeah, I am definitely concerned and hopeful and very grateful that the new eyes that looked at this project are going to move forward with something like that and bring us something. So that I'm looking forward to. As far as the EOC, I'd still like us to investigate a mobile EOC. I think I've talked to Wanda Vollmer about it. I've talked to the chief about it. I think there's some great products out there that have a mobile aspect to it. So, and that would free up some real estate in that building. So, thank you.
Kerry?
I agree with the Public Works issue. Because this agenda item was just the police station, that's what I was focused on. But I understand what Jeff's saying and Bobby about the Public Works area, and it also needs to be updated. So I'm in agreement with that as well.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, I have another question. So in order, if we approve this tonight, which it appears that we will, what does it take to move to that other information that we're going to get? Well, do we need more money to fund even looking at the rest of it?
No, ma'am, no. So we've re-engaged with Casavan. Peter at Casavan is the principal at the architectural firm. So again, Fred's been working on, he's lit him up to update the drawings to the contemporary code standards. And with your direction, we'll continue to do the research on, again, is that 20 by 40 area, is it $300 a square foot? Is it $400 a square foot? It's based on, again, what Chief Euler said. I mean, the kitchen area is a little bit more expensive than just an open meeting room. But the beauty of the open meeting room is, again, with all the plugs and technology, is that it would have multiple functions. It's a multi-function room, right? CERT could meet in there, the community could meet in there, and we could light it up as an EOC with laptops to plug in when need be as well. So, no, ma'am, we don't need any additional funding or direction, I don't think, tonight.
All right, let's call a question. We have a motion, a second. We have a roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Enthusiastically, yes.
Councilmember Tice,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards,
Yes.
and Mayor Potter.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All righty, we'll move on to item number 8, which is approving a lease agreement with Pacific Repertory Theater for operations management of the Forest Theater and approving a Public Works budget amendment of $60,000 for initial upgrades. Chip, do you want to handle this? Bob, I mean, Bob's not here to give us point on this.
Ashley's going to run, I think she's got 2 slides, Mr. Mayor. Or maybe we don't even need them, Mr. Mayor. I mean, just wanted to thank Ashley. I wanted to thank Bob, who did a great job, took off his civil engineering hat and did lease negotiations. I want to thank Mr. Moore and one of his board members, Ms. Witten. It's no secret, we can talk about lease negotiations in closed session, which we did. And what you see before you, again, is the agreement that has been forged between the council and Pacific Repertory Theater. So we're real pleased. Again, I don't know if we need a whole heck of a lot more, Mr. Mayor. The agenda report's complete. If anybody in the public has any questions. We did receive a letter making some suggestions about shortening the term that was sent to you earlier today, but I don't have any other comments, Mr. Mayor.
Well, before I go to council members, I want to thank my colleague Carrie Tice for her participation in the ad hoc committee. Carrie, you were great. You're the board historian when it comes to this issue with the theater, and I really appreciate that. You're very valuable, very level-headed, very professional, so thank you. All right, is there any questions of staff at this time before I open up to the public? I don't see anybody. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item? I'm sorry, they are. Yes.
My name is Julie Hewitt, Mayor, council members, staff. I'm the business manager and one of the founding members of Pacific Repertory Theater. And just quickly wanted to say, to be considered for this, how much we appreciate it, how much we love the Forest Theater. A lot of us have connection. I performed there since 1980. The space is magical. The city is lucky to have it. We're supported so well by the police. We've interacted for years with all of you in this space, and we're just honored that you're considering this quickly. We've had a lot of interest. People are calling and we're saying, well, it's not yet, but we have this little slate of folks that are interested in using the space, and I kind of wanted to give you the flavor of what we're trying to bring to the space. Start out with production with MPC's off-campus program with Monterey High doing a production of Legally Blonde. We have a private birthday party, a 90-year-old Hans Lehmann. Really excited about that. The Dance Center coming in for 2 performances on a Monday night, which is kind of interesting. Forest Theater Guild, of course, moves in and does their traditional, they're going to do their movies and also a production of Little Shop this year. Then we would come in our traditional spot, August, September, Mary Poppins this year, and then a Moliere adaptation, The School for Lies, which we're really excited about. We've got the symphony wanting to come in for 2 concert performances. And then in addition, we're in discussion with the Guild about adding in some more movie nights, to get the community to come and love this space as much as we do. But I just want to thank you for your consideration and just let you know how much we appreciate this city and that space.
Julie, thank you. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Me too, real quick. I too want to thank, Mayor, City Council, members of the public. I too want to thank the negotiating committee, the ad hoc committee, Chip, Bob Harari, who's not here. It was a really pleasant experience for negotiating, and for those of us who are also involved in union negotiations every once in a while, that was a change. So really thank you for setting a really nice tone, Mr. Rewiring, and I thought Bob Harari did a great job creating those charts for us to follow and everything, so I really appreciate his work. I've been at the Forest Theater since I was 10 years old, so that's 50 years. So yeah, that's right, I'm 30. And it changed my life. I learned everything I know about theater at the Forest Theater, in the indoor theater with Marcia Hovick, and then working for years as an actor, as a technician on the upstairs stage. So for me, after 50 years on the property, it's almost a dream come true, because we've been thinking about this space and climbing the trees and bringing our children there for scores of years now. And all that time we've been thinking about, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a picnic table on the trail in the forest, or wouldn't it be nice to have, this or that. And now have the opportunity to bring those kind of suggestions to our city partners and make that stuff a reality. So again, thank you so much. It's been a really wonderful experience, and we've only just begun. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Is there anybody else before I go to the Zoom world?
I'm here. Good afternoon, Council and Chip. And I just want to say, hardly hear me here, that I have been with Pack Rep Theater as a board member in many different ways for many, many years. And my parents danced on the stage at Forest Theater way back. So I have all the faith in the world in Pack Rep Theater doing an excellent job of helping the city with the Forest Theater. And I just wanted to say that, and thank you. I think it's a win-win situation for both the theater and the city. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to the Zoom world. I believe Lee Rosen has his hand up, and then Lucinda Lloyd. Lee? You're muted. There you go.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff. As a member of both the Board of Directors of Pack Rep, as well as Board of Directors of the Monterey County Symphony, I would like to really commend the city staff team that worked to complete this agreement. It's a tribute both to the city and Pack Rep that an agreement of this magnitude includes no subsidy and an appropriate cost-sharing plan for improvements, as well as an agreement to include the city as a recipient of a portion of the facility agreement, the facility management fee on tickets, which will ensure that the fee goes to appropriate maintenance and improvements that are agreed both by the city and by Pack Rep. I would just like to urge the council to approve this excellent agreement, which will definitely provide enhanced community usage of this historic facility. As Julie spoke a few minutes ago, even before the agreement is launched, there is so much interest on the part of the community for the things that Pack Rep will bring to the Forest Theater. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate your comments. Lucinda Lloyd, I believe, is next.
Can you hear me, Dave?
Yes, I can. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Lucinda Lloyd, or Cindy Lloyd, and I just want to commend you for structuring this wonderful agreement with Stephen Moore and Pack Rep. My grandfather acted on the stage. I acted on the stage in 1948 in Midsummer Night's Dream, but I'd failed as a thespian, and I have really, I was so stage shy that I just hid behind the pine trees. But I do want to recognize Marcia Hovick's wonderful breathing life into the Forest Theater and into the life of so many actors throughout the years, one of whom, of course, is Stephen Moore. And I've watched him grow in stature, in ability, and in creation with the Pack Rep. He is truly, truly a Carmel product, and he is live theater in Carmel. So thank you very much for giving him and Pack Rep that opportunity to continue with the Forest Theater. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Yashin, do you see anybody?
Mayor, I don't see any more raised hands.
All right, we'll bring it back to council for direction. Council members?
I'll move that we pass resolution 2022-023, approving a lease agreement with Pack Rep Theater for operations and management of the Forest Theater, and approving a public works budget amendment of $60,000 for initial upgrades.
And it's the second half of this ad hoc. I'll second that. Hold on. Any other discussion? Jeff?
Yes, I'd just like to thank Dave and Carrie for all the work that you did putting this together, so that the three of us didn't have to. So thank you very much for that. And I'd also like to thank Stephen. I think Dave and Carrie told us that you behaved quite well during all your conversations. So thank you for behaving and not making us call the police on you again.
Classic. All right, we have a motion and a second and some levity included. That's always nice. Okay, can we get a roll call, please, Yashin?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
And Mayor Potter.
Aye.
Vote is unanimous.
Well done. Item number 9 is consider a resolution awarding a professional services agreement to Winter and Company for a not-to-exceed fee of $139,330 to provide consultant support for the Design Traditions 1.5 project to update the city's design guidelines and zoning code. Chip, did you want to speak to this?
I think Brandon's got a couple of slides, Mr. Mayor. We do have a question for you at the end of how you like to appoint members. I wanted to thank the council for asking Councilmember Ferlito specifically, and then thank Ms. Ferlito for her work that you directed on updating the contract. I think it's a much more holistic and kind of village-worthy contract. So great work to Brandon for forging it. And again, I think he got what he has 2 slides there. So thanks, Brandon.
Brandon, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I have a couple more, maybe a couple more than 2, but I will keep the speed of my presentation at a human scale, and that's a design guidelines joke for those that are so inclined. I won't talk too fast. So as Chip mentioned, we're here to talk about the Design Traditions project, and we're calling it 1.5. The current design guidelines, as we know, are 20 plus years old. They need an update. There's identified areas of weakness, and when I say weakness, it doesn't mean that it's weak necessarily, but ordinances and rules and regulations, they need to grow and evolve with the place they're supposed to serve over time. So that's where we're at right now. There have been changes in architecture and design. There's new materials out there to consider, faux materials that are reasonably good, renewable materials, eco-friendly, et cetera, things like that. There have also been updated laws, things like accessory dwelling units, housing, response to wildfire. So it's time. We are taking the 1.5 approach, and this is important to note, versus the 2.0 approach. Basically what this means is we're building and reshaping, reforming, and polishing rather than blowing up and starting from scratch. As I mentioned last time, we are recommending using Winter and Company. They have past experience. Nori Winter, who's the principal of the company, relatively somewhat retired, but has agreed because he loves Carmel and who doesn't, to come back and work on this project with us alongside his team, who is still going, remains current, actively speaking nationwide at American Planning Association, historic preservation conferences and things like that. So the company, Winter and Company, is still very active. We decided to include a zoning code update because they go hand in hand. Zoning code is really the law that implements these design guidelines. We're focusing on the areas of the zoning code, though, that are related to how the development looks and feels. And so it does go hand in hand with the design guidelines. Just a quick recap. So as Chip said, February 1st, we were here. We got direction to work with Councilmember Ferlito, which was a great experience. Thank you, Councilmember Ferlito, for your time working with me on that. We have expanded the scope. And mostly to ensure ample public involvement. That's something that we heard loud and clear. The sentiment from the council last time is this project happens once every 10 plus years. In this case, it's 20, so we need to make it count. The revised scope that you have has more dedicated public workshops. So these are workshops outside of the Planning Commission or City Council, just for the public to attend. There's 3 total of those on top of the 8 public hearings that we have, where of course the public can participate as well. We are asking for meetings with a city council appointed steering committee, and I'll get to that in just another slide. There's additional in-person coverage from Winter and Company. So not only Nori coming, but his principal urban designer will be at those meetings as well to make sure we get the best product possible. There's also some expansion of what topics will be considered, interface with the public right-of-way character, things like sidewalks, landscaping. This could even include, like we talked the other night, wireless sites, and how do those things look in respect to our design guidelines. Also looking at impacts of those new laws that I was talking about, ADUs, our regional housing needs assessment. What does a duplex look like if we're going to do those? Wildfire readiness, things like that. So really expanding the scope to make sure that it's a useful document. This, of course, did come with a cost. So we've gone from 83,000, which you saw last time, to about 139,000 right now. As we mentioned before, this is a sole source contract. Our city code does allow for this if it's in the best interest of the city. And one criteria or exception has to be met. In this case, there's two criteria, I believe, that are met. The city council can agree or not agree, but Winter and Company did draft the original Design Traditions project, so they have a specialized knowledge or skill, and it best serves the city's needs because we will have access to that information from the prior effort, would not be replicated by another firm, and will save costs for the city. So in my opinion, this does meet the requirements of the code for sole sourcing. As I mentioned earlier, we are looking to set up a steering committee. The whole purpose of this would be a group of 5 appointed residents. It's a focus group, more frequent meetings with staff and our consultant. They'd work very closely with us. It would function similar to the fire and ambulance ad hoc committee model. So we have a group that is in there and really understands. Of course, we're going to continue to meet with the public at large, but this would be a more focused group. We are suggesting each city council member appoint 1 member. So we can keep it as a manageable group. 5 seems like a good number. Anything more than that might be too many cooks in the kitchen, and we won't be as productive as we could be. We have some suggested qualifications for the city council to consider, things like being a full-time resident, having the available time to meet monthly or more, having an interest or some sort of expertise in design, architecture, the village character, things along those lines. Doesn't necessarily have to be a license or certificate, but some interest and perhaps expertise in that area would be good. And someone who's willing to come to the table with a collaborative approach to problem solving, meaning that they're not coming with a decision already in mind of what the design guidelines need to be. We want some collaborative partners from the public to work on, and then anything else that the city council might see as a qualification. So we would suggest coming back to you on April 5th, giving you this month as kind of a homework assignment. Come back on April 5th to appoint those members here at a public meeting. So it would be the month each city council member working to find someone to fill their position. So with that, our recommendation as staff is to approve the sole source contract with Winter and Company for Design Traditions 1.5. I do want to note that the contract start date that was attached, there was an error. We caught it. We forgot to update it, though. I'm so sorry. The contract should start March 2nd and run through March 31st. So we'll update that, obviously, before we bring it for signature. And so the direction we're looking for is yes or no on the steering committee, any additional nomination criteria, and then when you want to come back on that appointment date, we would recommend the very next city council meeting. And with that, I will end my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Are there any questions of Brandon by council members at this time? Not seeing anybody. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item tonight?
Nobody on Zoom, Mayor?
All right, we do have a speaker.
Mr. Mayor, I did just see Neil Cruz raise his hand and unmute himself.
Let me get this woman nice enough to come forward here personally.
Hello, my name is Carol Hall, and I'm now wearing my Carmel Preservation Association hat, and I would like to represent a large number of residents here in Carmel and thank Karen Ferlito for providing more opportunities for residents to speak up. I like the idea of a steering committee as well, and this is the first time I've heard about that. And I just have all good things to say about this. Thank you so much, and thank you, Brandon, also for giving us the opportunity for the residents to speak up on this topic. It's really very important, and I love the expansion of duties that has occurred as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on, let's go ahead and we'll get the people done in the building, and then we'll go to the Zoom world.
All right. Good evening. This is Nancy Toomey. Thank you, council and fellow residents in the council chamber here and online. Wanted to thank you very much for your efforts on behalf of this agreement. It's very valuable to our community as we are concerned about the changes in architecture that are happening in the city. So this will hopefully provide a path for tightening up some of the look and feel of the architecture in the city that is really critical to the charm that is why we live here, why businesses thrive here, why visitors come to visit as well. So thank you very much for your efforts on this behalf, and thank you to Karen for the added input. I wanted to also mention that as a part of the architectural theme of this particular topic, Carmel Residents Association is hosting Brandon Swanson on the 24th of March in the Carpenter City Hall, Hall in Sunset Center to talk about architecture in Carmel, and it's open to the public, so we welcome folks to join us there on the 24th. So thumbs up on the public workshops and the hearings. We will definitely be there to participate and provide input, and kudos, thank you. Appreciate this effort.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. Do come forward.
Good evening to you, Mayor Potter, council members. My name is Graham Norton, all members of the public. I'm very much in favour of this motion. For 40 or 50 years I lived in the Cotswolds in Britain, a beautiful part of 1,000 square miles covering about 3 counties. It's too late to get all the houses in Carmel to be built from Carmel stone, but in the Cotswolds every house has to be built from Cotswold stone. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to retain that tradition of design. You just have to visit that area to see, after hundreds of years, how it's remained exactly the same. It also attracts a goodly number of tourists. So I'd like to vote in motion of looking seriously at that idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Is there anybody else in this hall that would like to speak? Melanie?
Melanie Billig. I'd just like to echo the comments that have already been made about the wise decision to pursue this project by the city. I was on the original design traditions task force. We spent a long time putting that together. I was also sat on the planning commission at that time, and we decided that this kind of effort was desperately needed in Carmel. So it's about time we have an update. And we thank you all, especially Karen and Brandon Swanson, for working so hard to move this forward. And I think that the community will be deeply appreciative of this effort and will be very much involved in the workshops. And I think that when we come out of this effort, I think a lot of people in the community would be very happy with the product that we all come up with, because we all will be involved in it. And I again want to echo everyone by saying thank you very much for this opportunity, and the idea of a steering committee is, I think, extremely important to move this along and expedite the process. Otherwise, it'll be bogged down for a year or two, and I don't think we can afford that. So again, thanks for all of your efforts, and we really appreciate council's direction on this.
Thank you, Melanie. All right, I don't see anybody else in the hall here that would be speaking, so why don't we go to the Zoom world? I think Neil Cruz, didn't you have your hand up?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And council and Mayor, I didn't get my Zoom mask on today. I'm looking awfully old to myself. I'm trying to adjust the feeling I'm having. Anyway, thank you to Karen Ferlito for helping out so much with the detail on this. Really appreciate it. Thank you to Chip Rarick and Brandon Swanson. You have considered this, you have reconsidered it. I know it took a lot of time and work to do this. So you've really set a great stage for us. And I want to tell you that we're hearing from the residents, because we have just been overwhelmed with locals, just very emotionally wrought about what is happening to the architectural environment in Carmel. And to hear that this is now coming to open has really made a difference in their attitudes. They're very eager to participate this, and they now feel that they will be heard. So thank you so much for that. All of you really appreciate the amount of work that had to go into this. Just a couple of things I had for Brandon. Before, we had an Excel sheet that showed the layout of the whole process. Is that Excel sheet available by any chance? And then the second thing is, will this process include the discussion for a design review board? That's all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Is there anybody else wishing to speak from the Zoom land?
Mr. Mayor, it looks like Lucinda Lloyd has her hand raised.
Cindy Lloyd? Welcome back.
Mayor Potter, members of the council, Lucinda Lloyd, or Cindy Lloyd, as I'm more informally known. Thank you very much for this whole concept and idea. It's long overdue, but the most important part, I think, is what Karen has pushed for and introduced, and that is resident participation. So I don't need to say anything more except thanks very much, and I certainly hope it comes to fruition.
Thank you, Cindy. Anybody else? I'm not hearing anybody.
Mayor Potter, Rich Pepe.
Yes.
Mayor Potter, Rich Pepe.
Rich, go right ahead.
Oh, great. Thank you. And I want to echo everybody else's sentiment. It seems long overdue. And to what Neil Cruz said, he's getting a lot of comments from locals about what's happening in town and the need for this program. We're getting a lot of comments from visitors, by the way, in town saying town's changing and not for the better. And that might be due to sidewalks or business facades or streets and things of that nature. But this is way long overdue, and I applaud you all for taking this on. The only question I would like to have, and maybe I wish you would address it with the steering committee, I don't think I missed anything, but what would be the need to have somebody on the steering committee being a full-time resident? We have a lot of folks in town who may have lived in town for decades and maybe just moved out. I want to cite somebody like a Jack Galante, people with planning commission experience, really good experience that you may want to consider. I don't quite see the need for a steering committee member to actually be a full-time resident. They may have extraordinary experience even on city council planning commissions, but just don't happen to live here right now. So I would wish you would consider that just in case there is somebody who would qualify that can really benefit your steering committee. So thank you so much and best wishes to all.
Thank you, Rich. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Brandon, what do
Mr.
you
Mayor,
say?
I don't see any more hands. No, I think you're good.
All right, I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council for comments and direction. Council members?
Yes.
Jeff.
Thank you. First, I'd especially like to thank Karen for flagging this from last month. I remember 3 years ago when Dave and I and Jan and Carrie and Bobby sort of saw the results of the first sort of 1.1 attempt and how sort of dissatisfying that was because of the lack of public participation. And I'm just very glad that we, kind of stopped that at that point, got a little bit interrupted by the pandemic, and now it seems to be really progressing along really nicely with a good amount of public input. So thank you for all the work. And I would just like to put in a plug, Brandon. I know that the climate committee is talking about some stuff sort of tangential to this area. So if you could work with Agnes, most of the stuff that we're doing is sort of infrastructure related, but there's a little bit that has to do with exterior stuff on buildings. So you should definitely, talk to her about the recommendations that we will probably make, sort of at the beginning of the project. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Well, I would like to thank very much my fellow council members for allowing me to pull this last month to expand it a little bit so that there is more public input. That was really great that you did that, and I would really like to tell you how much I enjoyed working with Brandon on this. We just sat down and we went over line by line and said, oh, nope, that needs to be in person. Nope, you know, let's do it this way. He was just great to pull that all together. So I thank all of you. And what I would like to say is, as we move forward in this progress, that we join hands. I'm not going to ask you to sing Kumbaya tonight, but that we join hands in a very cooperative manner, because we all do really care about Carmel, and how we do infrastructure as our city is also as important as what happens in the residential area and how we contribute to the entire village character. So it's something that this is going to be a great opportunity for us to come together and talk about what's important and how we want our town to look and prosper and go on for the future. So thanks to all of you as well.
Carrie?
I just want to thank Karen for paying attention to the details. So we appreciate that. So thank you. I think it's a great project. I think we'll be able to have time and be able to get together on this. So thank you.
So, Bobby?
Again, yeah, thank you, Karen, so much for all the work. So out of, I don't know, what do we have, 7 speakers or so? And I think Rich Pepe brought up a good point, is how would we feel about adding, you know, somebody that's in the sphere of influence or somebody that doesn't live here full time, because 2 of the 7 speakers tonight don't live in town. And so I'm happy to make this motion to approve this, but how does the rest of the council feel about allowing other people in on that steering committee?
Well, it seems to me that there ought to be somebody from the business community at least having some input into the process, so I don't know whether we want to look at that being one of the criteria. I do think that it's a good idea that if we each appoint an individual member, I think that makes sense, rather than just having it, you know, on a first-come, first-served basis. I don't know how the council feels about that. But what do you think, guys?
If I may make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor, you know, someone who has a tie to the, so if you're going to, you know, not make it a requirement that they be villagers, that there should be some kind of a tie to the village, having lived here, having a business here, living in the sphere of influence, a familiarity with our characteristics and our character and our design traditions.
I would be happy I think that we should. That's, I guess, my point. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that. So my motion would be to approve this with the exception of allowing people that do not live, not taking that away, I guess, that criteria away.
Okay. Motion, do we have a second? I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. One of the reasons that we came to the idea that each of us could suggest someone for the committee was to have a broader array of people. So bring on your suggestion, and but keep in mind it should be someone who does have the time and the passion and the concern to do this. So when you ask someone, I would just say that I know the person I'm going to ask. I'm going to actually say, does this interest you? Do you have the time to commit to this? You know, do a little bit of
discourse.
A little bit of an interview,
Yeah.
not just, you know, a cold call.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, but I think also one of the things is we want that person who has the skill set to be able to facilitate discussion and not obstruct discussion just because they might disagree with what's being discussed.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be my desire for criteria.
And that was why that's why we keyed off in the presentation, Brandon keyed off the committee that council members Tyson Richards had with fire ambulance. Again, one of the requirements was people not come in with a whole litany of preconceived notions, that they really approached it with an open mind. And so that's why I think it worked so well. It was an opportunity to educate prior to providing direction to the full council.
So the motion then is to go ahead and have the council, each member of the council appoint one person, preferably somebody from the city, but not limited to, and then we'll make a decision as part of another action to go ahead and appoint those people to the committee. Okay, we have concurrence. All right, could we get a motion? We got a motion, we got a second, I second it. Okay, could we have a roll call, please, Yashin?
Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards,
Yes.
and Mayor Potter.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. It passes.
Okay, let's move on to our last order of business. One public hearing item tonight, that is consideration of a recommendation from the Historic Resources Board to the City Council that the City Council enter into a Mills Act historic property contract with MA 281-238 Les Auberges Carmel with Esperanza Carmel Commercial LLC for the historic Sundial Lodge, now known as L'Auberge Carmel, located in Monteverde, 2 northeast of 7th Avenue. Marnie, are you going to do this?
Yes, Mayor.
Oh, there you are. I was looking for you in the audience foolishly.
Well, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. So before you this evening is a request to enter into a Mills Act contract with the owners of the L'Auberge Carmel Hotel. So the hotel is located actually right next to City Hall here on Monteverde to northeast of 7th. It was originally known as the Sundial Lodge and was designed by Albert Farr and constructed by M.J. Murphy. It is a local historic resource, so it's on our historic inventory. So the Mills Act Historical Property Contract is an economic incentive program for historic resources, and it provides a reduction in property taxes to offset the cost of rehabilitating and maintaining a historic resource. In order to be eligible for a Mills Act contract, the property must be listed on the Carmel inventory of historic resources and also must be added to the Carmel register. So the L'Auberge Hotel was actually voluntarily placed on the Carmel register in September of 2003, and then it was formally added to the Carmel Historic Inventory in 2005 and recorded with Monterey County in 2006. So the Historic Preservation Ordinance sets forth the approval authority for Mills Act contracts. The Historic Resources Board is responsible for considering requests for contracts and then making a recommendation to the City Council on whether to approve them, approve with conditions, or deny them. So on January 24th, the Historic Resources Board did adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council approve the contract. And now the contract is before the City Council to consider the Historic Resources Board recommendation and render a decision. So in considering whether to enter into the contract, the code does set forth 5 findings that must be found in the affirmative. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. Finding number 1 is that the building is designated as a historic resource and is listed on the Carmel register. And as I just mentioned, the L'Auberge Hotel does meet this criteria. Finding number 2 is that the rehabilitation and maintenance plan is appropriate in scope and sufficient in detail to guide the long-term rehabilitation of the resource. So included in your packet is the proposed maintenance plan. It includes $850,000 worth of improvements over a 10-year period. And those improvements include replacing aging infrastructure such as plumbing and heating, also upgrading ventilation and air conditioning systems, and then also repairing the character-defining features such as the original wood windows. So here's some photographs of some of the elements of the building that are in need of repair. And it includes some wood rot at the planter boxes as well as the rafter tails. There is some oxidation and weathering occurring on the roof, as well as some radial cracking in the plaster. Finding number 3 is that the alterations are limited to interior work and exterior rehabilitation. So back in 2002, the hotel was remodeled. That renovation was done consistent with the Secretary's standards, and included mostly interior work, but some exterior rehabilitation as well. So the renovations were consistent, and this finding can be made in the affirmative. Finding number 4 is that the contract will offset the cost of maintaining the resource. So again, a Mills Act contract is an economic incentive, and the property tax savings that the owner benefits from then is reinvested back into maintaining the resource. And finding number 5 is that the approval of the contract is an equitable balance of public and private interests and would not result in a substantial adverse impact to the city. So the City Council does have a policy of limiting Mills Act contracts to 15 over a 3-year period. And in the last 3 years, the city has only entered into 1 contract. Also, out of over 280 historic resources, the city currently has 10 Mills Act contracts that are active. Also, the city would continue to receive a portion of the property tax, and certainly the value in preserving the historic resources is a benefit, not just to the property owner, but to the public as well. So the question of, estimated property tax reductions does come up each time we talk about Mills Act contracts. The data here on this slide is just an estimation. It's really hard for staff to know what the actual benefit would be until the assessor does the actual calculations. But based on an annual property tax of $168,000, which was an amount provided by the applicant, the city would currently receive about $1,680 in property tax revenue. If the Mills Act contract resulted in a 40% reduction in property taxes, then the city revenue would drop to $1,008. At the high end, if the property yielded 70% savings in property tax, the city would receive a little over $500 per year under the Mills Act contract. So again, these are just estimates. The calculation is quite complex and is done by the Monterey County assessor, but hopefully this gives you sort of a kind of a glimpse at what the potential savings to the owner would be and what the impact to the city's revenue would be. So with that, staff's recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the contract. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marnie. Before I go to the council for questions, I'd like to ask Brian Curry. Brian, I live about a putting distance away from this place. Do I have a conflict? I have no fiduciary benefit from this decision at all. Do I have to recuse myself?
Chip and a putt.
Yeah.
I got it. The answer is yes.
All right.
You're within 500 feet, did you say?
Yeah, I'm within about 9 iron maybe. On a bad shot. On a really bad shot.
I guess it depends
I'm
on.
Step out, Bobby. You can run the show.
Well, it depends on how
I'm
far you
gonna
get
have
through
to.
my iron.
If the mayor has to, then I will have to as well because I have a rental kitty corner to it.
Yeah.
There we go. That's another 3.
Yes, so sorry about that. We should have caught that, but
sorry.
I will designate Carrie as Mayor Pro Tem for the moment because she's the most senior member of the council. And I think we want to give the applicant time to speak too.
Acting up, Bobby.
Okay, well, here we are. So we've heard from staff, and nobody on council has any questions? Oh, Jeff does.
Marnie, could you put up the presentation again, like the last slide where you talked about the property tax revenue, please? So I have a question for you. $168,000 a year property tax, 0.01%. Doesn't the city get 6% a year from the property tax revenue? So the city side, and this is only the first question, but the city side is like $10,000 a year, not $1,680 a year. Is that right?
Yep. So the property is assessed at 1% of the value, 10% of the 1% of the value, and then we get 6% of that, Mr. Barron. So I don't.
$168,000 is the annual bill, the property tax bill for the property.
And we would get 6% of that, sir.
So we would get about $10,000 a year.
It's $10,080. You're correct.
Okay, so where does the rest of the money go?
It goes to Monterey County, to the school district, to the state.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm clarifying here. The chart should say 6% instead of 1%?
That's correct, Councilmember Tice.
Okay.
It should. That was our error. Sorry about that. It was, and actually, it was meant to be. We put 1%, so we apologize for the error on that.
All right, I'm just trying to clarify for the public as well. Okay. All right. Any other questions, Jeff? Karen?
Well, now I'm a little confused. I would like some clarification on the figures, please, for the taxes.
Martin, maybe you could put that slide back up and then or just run through the numbers without the slide, because maybe the slide's making it more confusing.
So if I could have just a few seconds, I'll recalculate the numbers, and we'll see if Brandon can beat me to it.
Well, Councilmember Filito, as she's doing that, so the property is taxed. The property tax is at 1% of the value of the property, and then the city scoops 6% of the 1%. And so that's where that recalculated number of $10,080, that's 6% of 1% of the property tax amount. And then, as Councilmember Barron asked, the rest of that goes to the county. The city's portion of that is only small compared to the rest.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff?
Yeah, and Brandon, I think of the rest, so it's $168,000 a year. Doesn't the school district get about 70% of that money?
I'm sorry, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I know it is a sizable portion.
You know, I have that dollar bill in my office. I can go peel it off my dry erase board, but that sounds about right, Mr. Barron. The lion's share of property taxes do go to schools.
So any other questions from council? I'll take it out to the public. Anybody present in chambers? Go ahead. David, come on up.
Good evening, council members, City Administrator Rarick, public. Just as a point of clarification, I heard what the city attorney said, but neither Mr. Richards' property or Mayor Potter's property was on the noticing 100-foot range is what we were told to notice, so just FYI. And also to Councilmember Barron's questions about the taxes, neither Marnie nor myself nor Brandon really know how the assessor does this. It's extremely complicated. And so we did our best to try to figure it out. Obviously, the property taxes in the city of Carmel have gone up quite a bit the last few years with all the sales. The Mills Act is 50 years old this year. It was formed in 1972. And many historical preservationists feel this is one of the most important laws passed in California for restoration and maintenance of qualified historic buildings. L'Auberge Carmel, we feel, is one of the most important historical buildings in Carmel-by-the-Sea. I'd like to thank our team, Ken Seavey, historian, and Chris Barlow, who's a registered Mills Act architect who helped with our application and identified the maintenance and restoration needs. This building will be 100 years old soon. While we've done a good job restoring it in the past, it is extremely costly to maintain it, and it's getting more costly every year. And with the savings in the property tax to the property, and we don't actually know what that will be yet, we are going to use that money that we really need for maintenance. So that is just my comments, and I can answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you, David.
Thanks.
Anybody else in the public like to make a comment on this item? All right. I'll look in the Zoom. Yashin, do you see anybody? Brandon? I can't see.
No, Madam Chair, you're good.
Nothing?
No members of the public raising their hands, no.
All right. Then I'll close public comment and bring it back to council for discussion. Jeff?
Yeah, happy to go first. 3 years ago, we had this discussion when we were talking about the Frank Lloyd Wright House, and the amount of money there was significantly smaller on a year-to-year basis, and I did vote against the contract. It's not that I think the Frank Lloyd Wright House isn't historically important, or that I think Auberge is historically important. I agree with Mr. Fink's analysis that it's a very important property in downtown Carmel. What I'm having a problem with is the abatement of, what could be $80,000 a year in property taxes. It's true that of the $80,000 a year, and I'm just using this number because it's half of $168,000 a year. The $80,000 a year, it's true that only $5,000 of that comes to the city, but the other $75,000 of that goes to the county and especially to the Carmel school system. And I'm really troubled by the ability of the city to have such a material impact on the finances of these other organizations. And so I'm really struggling with this, and I'm planning on voting no for the same reasons that I did 3 years ago.
Thank you. Karen, would you like to comment, or would you like me to go, or?
Go ahead.
All right. I understand what Councilmember Barron is saying. However, we don't have many of the Mills Acts in the city. The whole point of the Mills Act is to encourage people to renovate and keep Carmel. With older buildings like this, I think that's really important. This particular building is a cornerstone right down the street from next door to City Hall. The property taxes, when you're trying to renovate, that's $168,000 a year is a pretty big chunk, I would say. And with the issues of COVID that we just went through in the hospitality industry, that also had a big impact on what people that own properties could do or not do, because the money stream wasn't coming in because we didn't have any guests. So I appreciate when people want to improve their properties. I think it's important for the city. It's important for our visitors. So I would support the resolution and adopt it, but we'll see. We've only got 3 people up here, so we'll see what happens.
Well, this is interesting, since I have not really had the opportunity to look at a Mills Act property as you all did in the past. I hear Councilman Barron's concern about the property taxes not going to the school system, and that is something that is a bit troublesome. I do have a question. When this property changed hands just a few years ago, was there a reassessment at that time of the taxes?
Yeah, so properties are reassessed upon sale.
Okay.
So the new assessed value would be the sale price.
So I'm still having a little trouble with this. $168,000 is what the property owner is paying now per year in taxes.
Correct. So if you extrapolate that, the assessed value is $16,800,000.
Okay. And we only get a very small portion of
Correct.
that into our Carmel city coffers.
Yes, ma'am. And next time you come to my office, the dollar bill I'm talking about comes from the county assessor when you get your tax bill every year, right? It's got a what's it called? A pie graph, right?
Yeah.
And it has it broken down who gets what percentage. So the property, the easiest way of thinking about it is if you have a property that's assessed at $1 million, the assessed value, the property tax is 1% of that, so it's $10,000 a year. We get 6% of that, so we get $600. The rest of it goes to other governmental agencies.
Okay. And there's only how many of these? 10? Is it 10?
Marty, did you say we had 10? Yeah, we have 10 since we developed the program citywide.
Okay, we have 10, and you can only have how many total over?
It was 15 over 3 years.
3 a year.
3 a year.
You can only approve 3 a year.
Correct. So and that was again the council's concern was exactly what Mr. Barron, part of where Mr. Barron was going was this erosion of our property tax base, which is such a significant part of. Well, you saw the chart earlier. It's 28% of our revenue.
Okay, and taking all of that into consideration, and also taking into consideration that some properties in Carmel have sold for really outrageous prices this year, so I anticipate our property tax will actually go up overall. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, and that's why it will, that we build in a 5%, it's no secret, we build in a 5% increase generally annually. We do track property sales, so we try to apply a metric to it. Let me say, the Mills Act, and Mr. Barron and I have had a couple conversations about this, very, very civil conversations. The benefit of the Mills Act contract is it adds to our police powers, not chief's police powers, small p, in that we can enforce Mr. Fink to maintain the property. And that's the preservation. It's contractual, so it's reciprocal, so it's a quid pro quo. But we, on an annual basis, we see that what Mr. Fink is investing in the property, and we say, you need to replace the gutters, or look, something's leaking. So there's an obligation to maintain, which helps preserve the resource.
Okay, and that is a service the city provides, that inspection service, that advice. Is that correct?
Well, again, in your packet, there's a chart that was done by an architectural historian, Mr. Seavey or Mr. Barlow, that was reviewed by Ms. Waffle and Mr. Swanson that said, yes, this looks like a reasonable investment. It's $850,000 investment over the first period, which again, it's broken down by year or semi-annually. The improvements or the maintenance that Mr. Fink will do. So again, instead of paying that to his property taxes, he's paying it to maintain the building.
Okay. All right, well, I can support that. I can support this.
Okay, I was gonna, because Mr. Fink is the applicant, did you say you had another comment? Even though I've closed public comment, because you are the applicant, I'm giving you an opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember Tice. And Jeff, I really appreciate your comments. My kids went to middle school and Carmel High. I've paid property taxes here for 30 years. We all have. It's an incredible school system. I think if you look at the Carmel Unified School budget, it's pretty amazing how much it's gone up with what's happened with property taxes in the area, especially the last 24 months. But the $85,000 a year of 10 years, $85,000, that's only a piece of what we spend to maintain that building. That building is incredibly expensive to maintain. And so this will help us make it shine even more. And by the way, when I bought that in 2002, it was paying $42,000 in transient occupancy tax. Last year we paid $330,000 in transient occupancy tax. So I think we're doing our part to help the city with its budget, and really appreciate your support on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, then I will move approval of.
This is,
Oh.
yeah, excuse me, this is Brian. I need to interject here. Sorry to interrupt. I noticed that the method of approval for the contract is a resolution. I'm looking at the agenda packet, resolution 2022-024. And I need to call everyone's attention to Government Code Section 36936. It's fairly short. I'm just going to read it. Resolutions, orders for the payment of money, and all ordinances require a recorded majority vote of the total membership of the city council. So the total membership of your city council is 5, and a majority of 5 is 3. So if the vote on this resolution is not 3-0, then under that government code section, the resolution would not pass. Having said that, I am not aware of a legal requirement since, well, let me back up. What you are approving or proposed to be approving tonight would be the Mills Act contract, reservation contract. And to my knowledge, and I'm going to need to research this, and I don't want to give an answer off the cuff, I don't believe there's a legal requirement for that contract to be approved by a resolution. I also will need to check your municipal code to see if there's anything in there that requires contracts to be approved by resolution. Now, if there is not a requirement for the contract to be approved by resolution, either in state or local law, then this matter could be brought back to your next meeting with it being with the proposed action to be a motion. But you wouldn't be able to adopt a resolution on a 2-to-1 vote. So those are your options.
Okay, so one of the options is to continue this until there's a determination about that.
Or
yes.
You could, or you could exercise the vote, and if it fails, we could bring it back based on Mr. Pyrick's valuation, Madam.
So if we made a motion, we wouldn't make it with the resolution. We would do it with just the.
You would,
Okay.
because that would be the forcing factor that would obligate us to bring it back with the alternative adoption scenario.
And as I said, that this will give me time to do the research to see if there's any requirement. I don't know of any, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Any requirement in state or local law that the approval of the contract be by resolution. So if it does require a resolution, then it wouldn't come back to you in April because, well, I don't want to presuppose what the vote's going to be. So I agree with the comment that was made. If you want to make the motion now and see what the vote is, and then if it doesn't get 3 votes, then we can figure out what to do with regards to whether to bring it back or not.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, Brian. All right, so looks like we could have a motion on the floor, if anybody wants. And with the staff report, we would The motion would be to adopt the resolution or not adopt it. No, to adopt the resolution 2022-024, approving the Mills Act historical property contract with LaBerge Carmel for the historic Sundale Lodge, known as LaBerge Carmel Hotel, located on Monteverde 2 northeast of 7th Avenue. So I'll make that motion.
And I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion?
Yes. Question for, I'm not sure who this question would be for. Can we make a motion, what is, first is sort of an exploratory question, what is the process for determining what the new tax bill will be? Like, can you, Brandon, call the tax guy, the tax gal in Salinas and ask them this question and have an answer back in a week or two? Or is this a process that takes months?
That's a great question. I knew that this was something you wanted to know. So actually, Marty and I have been working for the last couple of weeks to try to work with the tax collector's office. And it's actually run out of the assessor's office, we found. So we've been working with the assessor's office who manages the Mills Act program. I called my counterparts in the planning department because they have to estimate this too. It's not something that's easy to figure out until it's actually approved and it's run through the assessor's system. We can certainly take another swing at it. I know the assessor, I know that the mayor does too, so I can call the assessor and try a little bit more, but we have been trying. It's not an easy thing to get out of them, and not something they really want to commit to.
Yeah, my issue is that, I'm sympathetic to the plight here and the need to do the renovations on the building, but there's a limit as to, what I'm willing to, what I'd be willing to approve. And if the number was, of $168,000 a year, so if the amount of the reduction was, $10,000 a year, I'd be okay. And if the amount of the reduction is $80,000 a year, I'm not okay. And so the number is important to me. And if there was a way, and I feel like I'm treading on quicksand here. If there's a way to limit the amount of deduction tonight, I might be okay. Or, I might be okay doing that next month if we could limit that as part of the contract. I don't know, obviously, I wasn't planning on being in this situation. I'm not quite sure how to proceed. So I know that on the motion on the floor, I will vote no, but I don't know if there's an alternative that would, if there's an alternative resolution here, to Brian's point, that would allow me to vote yes, that I feel comfortable voting yes for, or if I should simply be quiet and just do what the attorney has recommended and just allow this to come back next month for a, sort of a different kind of vote that would allow council members Tice and Ferlito to carry the day on the 2-to-1 vote with what's before us. So it's either a compromise, sort of, maybe, possibly, or just come back next month and just sort of redo this and the way it seems like it was originally headed.
Chip, do you have a comment?
I hear what Mr. Barron's saying. My suggestion is that you do take a vote on the item that's on the floor, and if that fails, then we should ask Mr. Fink whether time is of the essence, to bring it back in April. It is, I don't know whether he had intended the Mills Act contract to, it can't take effect. The bills that we'll all be paying in April, you're paid in arrears, right? So again, we're paying for the back half of the assessment year. So I would imagine he's looking for it to be proactive on a going forward basis. That way, again, you could give Mr. Pierrick the time to do the research on the alternative method of adoption. Or
Chip, if I could add just so that it helps the color, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't believe, and Marnie can corroborate this because she's been so deeply in this, I don't even believe it becomes effective and they realize any benefit of this until after December of this year. it's an annual thing.
Well, I do want to remind the council that the Historic Resources Board did feel that this was a worthy project, and that's why we're looking at it. You know, I like the fact that we oversee the improvements, so it's not just, you know, this is something that is reviewed year by year. So I just want people to understand that. So, I don't know why, this is always funny. Whenever I take over, there's always some, you know, it usually, you know, it doesn't usually go like this. So, I'm trying to figure out, it sounds like we need to take a vote. And so I'm gonna, unless there's any more discussion here, I'm gonna call to question the vote at this time. Yashin? Any more discussion? No. Go ahead, Yashin.
Councilmember Barron.
No.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Per the resolution, the motion fails.
So at this point, we're gonna let Brian research this to figure out if we need to bring it back for the next council meeting.
Yeah, I don't think you need to I'm sorry, Mr. Purick.
I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say, I'm not sure what your general practice has been. You could, I've seen different methods. If you want to continue an item, you could make a motion to have the item continued, or you could just give direction to city administrator. Councilmember Tice can do that, given that she's the chair of the meeting at the moment.
That's what I was going to say. So I don't think you need to do a formal continuance. You just give me direction, and we'll bring it back just as soon as possible.
Well, I think we have direction. We've taken a vote. If it's based on a resolution, I'm sorry, but I can't remember if we've done it before as a resolution or not. So I can't remember that.
Yeah.
So we will let Brian and Chip do some research.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
so I would suggest you be in contact with Mr. Fink.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's see. I think I don't know if Dave's going to come back.
I think he's going to.
They left the building? Okay. Thank you for.
He left all his stuff.
Thank you, Chief. So the next item on the agenda is any future agenda items that anybody would like to add?
Yes.
Okay.
So as many people know, I've been having these community meetings, and I am hoping that I'm anticipating that we will have something, and we would like some time, perhaps on next month's council agenda, to present some of the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, so the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and several of us will be doing agenda review. I believe it's next Tuesday, the 11th at 11. So I will ask the mayor for some time, Mr. Barron and Councilmember Tice.
Yes, and I would like to bring up a future agenda item. I think Richard Kreitman has a point about about smoking in the city. There are cigarette butts all over. We are on the bay. Those cigarette butts end up in the ocean during the winter, so I think he has a point that we should discuss the possibility of joining some of the other cities in California that are non-smoking.
Thank you.
And I think, you know, to sort of Karen's point, you know, one of the things that's come up with regards to cigarette smoking and fires on the beach is general air pollution. And we have often bandied about the idea of banning wood fireplaces in town, and perhaps Karen's cigarette discussion could be expanded a little bit, and we could have at least a preliminary discussion about fireplaces.
Yeah, I think that's going to be part of the discussion for the zoning code amendment update as well, and the design traditions 1.5. So, and all the work that we're doing on fire fuel load abatement and climate action. So, I think there's a lot of areas that point to it, Mr. Barron. So, perfect, we'll do. Madam Chair, we were going to adjourn the meeting in the memory of J.D. Alvarado, George Alvarado, the young officer who died in the line of duty in the city of Salinas.
Yes. Does the chief want to speak to that?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Obviously, anyone in law enforcement knows this is a very difficult time for any agency, and certainly for the region. I will keep the council and Mr. Rewiring informed as to future activities as it relates to funeral arrangements or services that are upcoming. And I would submit that perhaps we just have a moment of silence to recognize the fallen officer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, our hearts are definitely with Salinas, and it's a tough time, so thank you.
Do you think we should take a moment of silence?
Yes, we can take a moment of silence, so.
Yeah, why don't we just, we can adjourn in his memory, so.
Okay.
Thank you, council. Thank you,
Thank
Chief.
you. At this point, can we adjourn?
We're adjourned.
Or does the mayor want to come back? I mean, I'm
don't-
trying to figure it out.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
All right. We're going to adjourn this meeting.
You did a good job.
Thank you, everybody.
I thought he had left the building, I said, but he had, all that stuff was here.
I thought all this crap you left.
He's daytime.
Carrie, I have to tell you,
Where is he?
He's right there. Yeah, it's closed. Tell him to come in.